The rusted garage door groaned as Evan wiped grease from his hands, and that's when she appeared, a trembling stranger with mascara-streaked cheeks and a question so desperate it would shatter his carefully constructed world. "Will you pretend to be my fiancé? Just for one day, please. I'll lose everything if you don't." What happened next changed two broken lives forever. I'm about to tell you a story of impossible circumstances, unexpected love, and the beautiful truth that sometimes emerges from the most desperate lies. Stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and comment with the city you're watching from, so I can see just how far this story travels. The August heat hung over Cedar Mill like a wet blanket, the kind of suffocating humidity that made even the simplest tasks feel monumental. Evan Brooks stood beneath the lifted hood of a 2019 Honda Accord, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision as he replaced a worn serpentine belt. Sweat traced rivers down his temples, disappearing into the collar of his faded blue work shirt, the one with Brooks Auto Repair embroidered in thread that had long since begun to unravel. At 34 years old, Evan had learned that life rarely followed the blueprints people drew for it. The small-town garage he ran alone was proof of that, inherited not through careful succession planning but through tragedy when his father's heart gave out 3 years ago, leaving behind this building, a mountain of debt and a legacy of honest work that Evan refused to let die. The bell above the office door chimed, and Evan didn't look up immediately. "Be with you in just a minute," he called out, his voice carrying the rough edges of a man who spent more time talking to engines than people. "Take your time." The voice was feminine, uncertain, carrying a tremor that made Evan pause mid-wrench turn. He ducked out from under the hood and found himself looking at a woman who appeared to be held together by nothing more than determination and the thin fabric of her grocery store uniform. She stood just inside the garage bay, clutching her purse like a shield. Her name tag read Lena, in cheerful letters that seemed almost cruel given the redness rimming her eyes and the slight shake in her shoulders. She was pretty in an unconstructed way, dark hair escaping from a practical ponytail, features that belonged on someone who laughed easily, though clearly laughter had been in short supply recently. "Car trouble?" Evan asked, reaching for a rag to wipe his hands. "No." She took a breath that seemed to require enormous effort. "I mean, yes. Sort of, but not the kind you can fix with tools." Evan's eyebrows lifted slightly. In his experience, people who walked into auto repair shops with problems that couldn't be fixed with tools usually needed the kind of help he wasn't qualified to give, the kind that required therapists or lawyers, or maybe both. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I know how crazy this is going to sound." The words tumbled out of her now, picking up speed like a car rolling downhill with failed brakes. "I've driven past this shop probably 100 times. I work at Henderson's Grocery, just up on Main Street. I've seen you there. You always buy the same thing, black coffee, no sugar, and whatever sandwich is on special. You hold the door for people. You say thank you like you actually mean it." Evan felt a strange flush creep up his neck. He hadn't realized anyone had been watching him closely enough to catalog his grocery habits. "That's observant. I notice people." She laughed, but it came out hollow. "It's what I do. 12 years as a cashier, you learn to read customers in 3 seconds flat. Who's having a bad day? Who's barely holding it together? Who's genuinely kind versus who's just performing kindness for an audience? And which one am I? Genuinely kind." Her eyes met his directly for the first time, and he saw something in them that he recognized intimately, the particular desperation of someone standing at the edge of their rope's frayed end. "That's why I'm here. Because I need someone genuinely kind, and I've run out of options, and I know this is insane, but I have to ask anyway." Evan set down the rag, giving her his full attention now. Something about her vulnerability demanded it. "Ask what?" Lena Moore closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, they were shining with unshed tears that she was clearly fighting with everything she had. "I need you to pretend to be my fiancé. Just for tomorrow, just for one day. And I know how that sounds. I know you're thinking I'm either crazy or running some kind of scam or both. But I promise you I am none of those things. I'm just desperate." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Evan couldn't begin to untangle. Why? It was the only question that seemed to matter. Lena's composure cracked slightly, and she swiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Because my boss thinks I'm engaged, and tomorrow is the company's annual Family Day event, and if I show up alone or admit that the fiancé I've been talking about for 3 months doesn't actually exist, I'm going to lose the promotion I've been working toward for 5 years. The promotion that's the only thing standing between me and losing my apartment, my car, and what little dignity I have left. Evan processed this slowly, turning her words over like engine parts he was trying to fit together. You invented a fiancé? It started so small. Lena's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine shame. My supervisor, Carolyn, she's this old-school woman who thinks stability means everything. She was passing me over for promotions because she thought I was unattached, and therefore flight risk. Single women in their 30s apparently were ticking time bombs who might run off at any moment to chase romance in other cities. That's discrimination. That's also nearly impossible to prove and expensive to fight. Lena laughed bitterly. So one day she was grilling me again about my personal life, and I panicked. I told her I was engaged. She immediately started treating me differently, better, like I was suddenly a real person with a real future, instead of some sad single woman she needed to worry about. And now the lie has grown. Now the lie has legs and a wedding date, and apparently needs to make an appearance at the company picnic. Lena's hands were trembling visibly now. I've tried everything. I thought about hiring an actor, but I can't afford it. I asked an old friend, but he's out of state. I even considered just calling in sick, but Carolyn made it very clear that attendance is mandatory for anyone being considered for the assistant manager position. Evan leaned against the Honda's fender, crossing his arms over his chest. Every logical instinct he possessed was screaming at him to politely decline, wish this stranger well, and return to the safe, predictable world of engines and transmissions. People lied all the time. It wasn't his job to help them maintain their deceptions. But something else nagged at him, a whisper of understanding that he couldn't quite silence. He knew what it felt like to be backed into corners by circumstances beyond your control. He knew the particular humiliation of having your worth measured by factors that had nothing to do with your actual abilities. And he knew, perhaps better than most, that sometimes survival required compromises that looked ugly from the outside, but felt necessary from within. Why me? He asked finally. Out of everyone in this town, why walk into my garage? Lena met his gaze steadily. Because last February, I watched you give a jump start to Mrs. Patterson when her car died in the grocery store parking lot. She didn't have any money on her, said she'd forgotten her wallet. You told her not to worry about it. She tried to pay you back the next week, and you refused. Said it was just a jump start, no big deal. Evan remembered that day. Mrs. Patterson had been on her way to visit her husband in the nursing home. The stress had been written all over her face. Taking her money had felt wrong. And 3 weeks ago, Lena continued, your daughter came into the store with you. Cute kid, maybe 6 or 7. She knocked over a display of soup cans, totally an accident, and you helped her pick up every single one. You didn't yell at her, didn't embarrass her. You made a game of it, turned it into something she was laughing about by the end. Mia, Evan said softly. Her name is Mia. Mia. Lena's voice gentled on the name. I watched how you treated her, and I thought, that's a good man. Not performing goodness. Actually good. She took a shaky breath. I need someone actually good. Someone who won't take advantage. Someone I can trust not to make this worse than it already is. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken negotiations and weighing calculations. Evan thought about his schedule tomorrow, empty except for an oil change he could easily reschedule. He thought about his bank account, leaner than he'd like, with the back-to-school expenses for Mia looming on the horizon. He thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea, and then he thought about the woman in front of him, who had apparently observed him for months before concluding he was decent enough to trust with her desperation. How long would I have to be there? Hope flickered in Lena's eyes like a pilot light catching. Maybe 4 hours? 5 at most. It's a picnic at Lake Crescent. Games, food, mingling with coworkers. You just have to hold my hand occasionally, maybe share some rehearsed stories about how we met, how you proposed. I've already laid the groundwork. My coworkers think they know all about you. What do they think they know? That you're an auto mechanic named Evan, who grew up in Cedar Mill, that we met when I brought my car in for repairs and you charged me half what the dealer quoted. That you proposed after 6 months because you knew right away I was the one. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I basically told them the truth about who you are. I just fabricated the relationship part. You've been telling people about me for 3 months. Like I said, I notice people. Her cheeks flushed pink. You were someone worth noticing. Evan felt something shift in his chest. Not romantic, not exactly, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement of being seen by someone who had taken the time to look. I'd need to bring Mia, he said, surprising himself. I don't have childcare tomorrow, and she's not old enough to stay home alone. Yes, absolutely. Bring her. Oh, that actually works perfectly. I told Carolyn you had a daughter from a previous relationship. She'll expect to meet her. Previous relationship, Evan repeated. The term felt clinical, like it could encompass anything from a high school sweetheart to a complicated history that was neither short nor sweet. It encompassed, in his case, neither, just a woman who had decided that motherhood didn't suit her and had signed away her parental rights when Mia was 18 months old, leaving Evan to figure out the rest alone. Is that okay? Lena asked, suddenly uncertain. Is Mia's mother in the picture? No. Evan offered nothing more, and Lena didn't push. So, is that a yes? Her voice was barely above a whisper now, trembling with hope she clearly didn't want to invest in prematurely. Evan thought about the look on his father's face the day he'd finally gotten the garage books balanced, the quiet pride that had made the old man's eyes shine. His father had believed in doing right by people, even when it was inconvenient. Especially when it was inconvenient. This was certainly inconvenient. What time should I pick you up? The next 2 hours unfolded with the surreal quality of a dream where nothing quite made sense, but everything felt strangely significant. Lena called into her afternoon shift at Henderson's, claiming a family emergency that wasn't technically false. Her future felt very much like an emergency situation. Evan closed the garage early, leaving a note on the door that said, "Family matter. Back Monday," and feeling oddly justified in the phrasing. They sat in Evan's modest living room while Mia played with her collection of small plastic horses in the corner, occasionally looking up to study the stranger who had appeared in their Saturday afternoon. Lena had brought a notebook filled with details she'd been maintaining for months, a fictional timeline of their relationship that she'd constructed with the careful attention of someone who understood that lies, to be believed, required infrastructure. March 15th, she said, pointing at a date circled in red. That's when we officially started dating, according to what I told Carolyn. I brought my car in for that weird noise in the brakes. What kind of noise? Lena blinked. What? If someone asks me about fixing your car, I need to know what was wrong with it. Car people notice details. A smile tugged at Lena's lips, the first genuine one Evan had seen since she walked into his garage. I don't actually know anything about cars. That's why I picked a mechanic. No one would expect me to have technical knowledge. Smart. He considered this. We'll say it was your brake pads. They were worn down to the metal, making a squealing sound every time you braked. Common problem, easy fix, good conversation starter about how you really should have come in sooner, but you'd been putting it off because money was tight. That's actually true, Lena admitted. The money being tight part, I mean. I drive a 2003 Corolla that probably does need new brake pads. Bring it by Monday. I'll take a look. Something softened in her expression. You don't have to. I want to. The words were out before he could second-guess them. You're trusting me with something important tomorrow. The least I can do is make sure your car isn't going to kill you. Lena held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and Evan felt that shift in his chest again, that strange recognition of being seen. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him that way. Since Sarah left, his social world had narrowed to clients, fellow business owners on Main Street, and the parents of Mia's classmates at pickup and drop-off. He'd grown comfortable with his invisibility, with moving through life without leaving much of an impression on anyone except his daughter. Being noticed felt dangerous, but not entirely unwelcome. Okay, Lena said finally, looking back at her notebook. So March 15th, brake pads. You asked me out while my car was being worked on because we'd been talking for 3 hours, and you didn't want to let me leave without getting my number. Did I now? You were very charming about it. Her cheeks colored again. I told Carolyn you made some joke about how you'd never met anyone who could make waiting for brake pads entertaining. She thought it was adorable. Evan filed this detail away. And the proposal? September 3rd. We were having a picnic at Lake Crescent, which is perfect because that's where tomorrow's event is. And you proposed at sunset. Simple ring, simple question. I cried. You cried. It was very romantic. I don't really cry. You did that time. Her voice was firm. You told me later that you'd been planning it for weeks, that you knew you wanted to marry me the first time you saw me laugh at something that wasn't actually funny. What wasn't funny? Lena paused, caught off guard by the question. I don't know. I didn't think that far ahead. A bad pun, Evan decided. I made a bad pun about cars. Something about how my love for you was exhausting or how you drove me crazy. You laughed anyway, even though it was terrible, and I knew right then. Lena stared at him, her pen hovering above the notebook. That's actually really good. I have my moments. Daddy makes jokes like that all the time, Mia announced from her corner, apparently listening with more attention than either adult had realized. They're not funny, but I laugh anyway because it makes him happy. Evan felt his heart squeeze with that particular mixture of love and vulnerability that only Mia could provoke. Thanks for the endorsement, kiddo. You're welcome. She returned to her horses, apparently satisfied with her contribution. Lena was smiling now, really smiling, with teeth and crinkled eyes and something that looked like relief. She's wonderful. She's the best thing I've ever done. The words came out simple and true, carrying none of the defensive edges that usually accompanied discussions about his daughter. Everything else in my life has been held together with duct tape and prayers, but Mia turned out good despite my best efforts to screw it up. I don't think you're screwing it up at all. You don't know me well enough to make that assessment. I know enough. Lena's voice was quiet but certain. I know you close your shop in the middle of the day to help a stranger. I know your daughter loves you enough to fake laugh at your bad jokes. I know you agreed to do something completely insane because you saw that someone needed help. She paused, adding softly, Those aren't small things, Evan. The sound of his name in her mouth felt oddly intimate, even though they'd been using each other's names all afternoon. Perhaps it was the way she said it, not as a stranger addressing another stranger, but as something closer, something that hadn't been named yet. We should talk about physical boundaries, Lena said suddenly, her cheeks flushing again. Tomorrow, in front of my coworkers, they'll expect engagement behavior. What does engagement behavior look like? Hand-holding, standing close, maybe... She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Maybe occasional casual touches, an arm around the waist, that kind of thing. Evan nodded slowly. It had been so long since he'd touched anyone with intention that the idea felt foreign. Hugging Mia, carrying her when she was tired, tucking her into bed, those motions were as natural as breathing. But touching an adult woman? Touching someone who might notice, might respond, might change the shape of the air between them? That was different. I'm okay with whatever makes the situation believable, he said carefully. Just maybe give me a signal if I'm doing something wrong, or not doing something I should be doing. How about if I squeeze your hand twice, it means more affection needed, and 3 times means back off a little? That works. Mia appeared at Evan's elbow, her plastic horses temporarily abandoned. She studied Lena with the unfiltered scrutiny that only children could manage, her brow furrowed in concentration. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? Evan opened his mouth to correct her, to explain that Lena was just a friend who needed help. But Lena spoke first. I'm... Something like that, she said gently, meeting Mia's gaze without evasion. Your dad is helping me with a really important problem, and tomorrow we're going to pretend to be engaged. Do you know what engaged means? It's when you promise to get married, Mia said promptly. My friend Sophia's mom got engaged, and now she has a new dad who makes really good pancakes. Something complicated crossed Lena's face. Evan couldn't quite read it, but she smiled. That's right. So tomorrow we're going to pretend to be engaged so that I don't get in trouble at work. But it's just pretend, okay? Like when you play make-believe with your toys. Mia considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice weighing a constitutional question. Will there be other kids there? I think so, yes. My coworkers have families. And food? Lots of food. It's a picnic. What kind of food? Lena looked helplessly at Evan, who suppressed a laugh. Mia, let the lady breathe. I just want to know if there will be hot dogs, Mia said reasonably. I like hot dogs. I'm sure there will be hot dogs, Lena promised. And probably hamburgers and potato salad and watermelon too. Mia's face brightened. I love watermelon. Then you and I are going to get along just fine. Something shifted in the room, something subtle but significant, like the moment when a key slides into a lock that had seemed too complicated to open. Mia, who was usually shy around strangers, who took months to warm up to new teachers and babysitters, and the parents of her friends, was looking at Lena with open curiosity and no trace of wariness. Evan wasn't sure whether to be relieved or terrified. They rehearsed for another 2 hours, running through likely questions and scenarios until the answers felt smooth enough to pass for truth. Where had Evan been born? Cedar Mill, fourth-generation resident, his great-grandfather had built the original garage in 1952. Where had Lena grown up? Spokane. Cesar moved to Cedar Mill 8 years ago for a fresh start after a failed relationship she didn't like to discuss. How had they known they were in love? The specifics varied, but the theme was consistent. They had recognized something in each other that they'd been looking for without knowing it. By the time twilight began softening the edges of the world outside, Mia had migrated from her corner to the couch, where she'd fallen asleep with her head in Evan's lap, worn out by the excitement of an unexpected visitor and the effort of being on her best behavior. She's out cold, Lena observed softly, looking at the sleeping child with an expression Evan couldn't quite name. You weren't kidding when you said she was the best thing you'd ever done. She makes everything else make sense. Evan stroked his daughter's hair absently, emotion as automatic as his heartbeat. Before her, I was just drifting, going through the motions. The garage was just a place to work, Cedar Mill was just a place to live, but after she came along, everything had a reason. Every early morning, every late night, every sacrifice, it all led somewhere. Her mother really isn't in the picture? The question was careful, probing without demanding. Evan appreciated the restraint. Sarah left when Mia was 1.5 years. Said she'd made a mistake, not Mia, but the whole life. Marriage, motherhood, Cedar Mill. She wanted different things, and those things didn't include us. That's terrible. It was honest, at least. Evan's voice was even, practiced in its neutrality. He'd had years to file down the sharp edges of this story. I'd rather have someone leave cleanly than stay half-present, resenting every moment. Mia deserves better than a mother who sees her as an obligation. And she's never tried to come back? See Mia? Reconnect? She signed away parental rights. Clean break. No visitation, no child support claims, nothing. He paused, adding quietly, I don't know where she is now. Last I heard she was in California, or maybe Oregon, somewhere far enough away that Cedar Mill became easy to forget. Lena was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with something that sounded almost like recognition. I know what it's like, being left behind, realizing that someone you thought loved you was actually just tolerating you until something better came along. Evan looked at her, really looked, and saw the history written in the shadows under her eyes, in the careful way she held herself, in the brittleness beneath her composed exterior. Is that why you moved to Cedar Mill? The failed relationship you don't like to discuss? Part of it. She drew her knees up to her chest on the armchair across from him, a self-protective gesture that made her look younger, more vulnerable. His name was Derek. We were together for 4 years, lived together for 2. I thought we were building something. Turns out he was building an exit strategy. Left me for his coworker 2 weeks after we signed a lease renewal. Jesus. It gets better. The laugh that escaped her was sharp enough to cut. They got married 6 months later, had a baby the year after that. Meanwhile, I was scraping together enough money for a security deposit and trying to explain to everyone why I was suddenly single and 30 and starting completely over. Cedar Mill was the fresh start. Cedar Mill was as far as I could afford to run. She shrugged, but the gesture was heavy with the weight of years spent rebuilding. The grocery store was hiring. The rent was cheap, and nobody here knew me as Derek's girlfriend who he dumped for someone more interesting. I was just Lena, new in town, trying to make it work. And you have been, making it work. Barely. The word came out ragged. Do you know how hard it is to climb any kind of ladder when you don't have the right education or the right connections or the right anything? I'm good at my job. I've trained half the staff, I've covered shifts when no one else would. I've been employee of the month more times than I can count. And still, when a management position opened up, Carolyn looked at me like I was asking for a favor instead of applying for something I'd earned. The stability thing. The stability thing. Lena's jaw tightened, like my marital status has anything to do with my ability to manage inventory and schedule staff. But there it is. The invisible barrier that no amount of hard work can break through unless you happen to have a ring on your finger and a partner at home. So you invented one. So I invented one. She met his eyes, and there was no apology in her gaze, only exhaustion and defiance. Judge me if you want. I judge myself enough for both of us, but I wasn't willing to let another 5 years pass while I watched people less qualified get promoted over me just because they had someone to come home to. Evan was quiet, processing this. The anger in her voice wasn't directed at him. It was the kind of anger that came from being cornered, from having to choose between integrity and survival and finding no good options on either side. I'm not judging, he said finally. I've made choices I'm not proud of too. We all do what we have to do. Thank you. The words were small but genuine. For understanding and for agreeing to help. I know this is a lot. It's one day. But even as he said it, Evan wondered if that was true. One day, 4 hours, a performance that would end and leave both of them to return to their separate lives. It should have felt simple. It didn't. I should go, Lena said, uncurling from the chair with the stiffness of someone who'd been sitting too long. Let you get Mia to bed. We have an early morning tomorrow. What time should I pick you up? The picnic starts at 11, maybe 9:30. That gives us time to arrive together, get settled, establish the narrative before anyone asks too many questions. I'll be there. They walked together to the door and Lena paused on the threshold, looking back at him with an expression that seemed to hold more than she was saying. Evan? Yeah? Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. For seeing someone who needed help and actually helping. Most people would have just... She trailed off, shaking her head. You know what? Never mind. I'll see you in the morning. She was gone before he could respond, her footsteps fading down the walk toward her parked car. Evan watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner, then closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. On the couch, Mia stirred, one eye cracking open. Daddy? Right here, sweetheart. I like her. You do? She has kind eyes. Mia yawned hugely, already sliding back toward sleep. Like she really sees people. Like how you look at me. Evan's chest tightened, out of the mouths of babes. Let's get you to bed, okay? Okay. But as he lifted her, she added drowsily, I hope she comes back. She will, Evan promised, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was promising. Tomorrow. She's coming back tomorrow. Good. Mia's arms wrapped around his neck with the absolute trust of a child who had never been given reason to doubt that the world, despite its chaos, would hold together. Tomorrow is going to be fun. Evan carried his daughter up the narrow stairs of their small house, past the photographs that lined the walls. Mia as a baby. Mia learning to walk. Mia on her first day of school. Mia with gap-toothed grins and scraped knees and endless curiosity. Somewhere in those pictures, there were gaps where Sarah should have been. He'd stopped noticing them years ago. But as he tucked Mia into bed and watched her settle into dreams, he found himself thinking about gaps of a different kind. The empty space at the dinner table where another voice might have been. The silence in the evenings after Mia went to sleep. The particular loneliness of being the only adult in a house designed for more. He'd grown used to it, accepted it as the shape his life had taken. But tonight, for the first time in years, that acceptance felt less like peace and more like resignation. Lena Moore had walked into his garage with desperation in her eyes, and a question so absurd it should have been easy to refuse. And instead of refusing, he'd said yes. He'd opened a door that had been closed so long he'd forgotten it existed. Tomorrow he would pretend to be someone he wasn't. He would play the role of a man in love, a man who had found his person, a man who looked at his future and saw something other than more of the same. And if he was being honest with himself, truly, brutally honest, the pretending part felt less like a burden than he wanted to admit. Morning arrived with the kind of golden light that made everything look better than it was. The peeling paint on the garage, the cracks in the driveway, the rust spots on his truck that he kept meaning to address but never quite got around to. Evan stood on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching Cedar Mill wake up around him, trying to quiet the nerves that had kept him tossing all night. He'd laid out clothes the night before, something he never did. His best jeans, the ones without any grease stains, and a blue button-down shirt that Mia said made him look like a real dad from TV. He wasn't sure what that meant exactly, but she'd seemed to think it was a compliment. By 8:30, Mia was dressed and practically vibrating with excitement. She'd chosen her favorite purple sundress, the one with tiny flowers along the hem, and insisted on wearing the plastic tiara her friend had given her for her last birthday. "Do you think there will be games?" she asked for the 5th time, bouncing on her toes by the door. "Lena said there would be games." "What kind of games?" "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll find out when we get there." "What if they have 3-legged races? I've always wanted to do a 3-legged race, but you need 2 people, and we only had me." Evan's heart clenched at the casual way she identified their family's size as a limitation. "Well, today you'll have me. And Lena. So if there's a 3-legged race, you can pick your partner." Mia's face lit up. "Really? Really?" The drive to Lena's apartment took 15 minutes through the quiet streets of Cedar Mill, past the hardware store and the diner and the elementary school where Mia would start 2nd grade in a few weeks. It was a small town in the best and worst senses. Everyone knew everyone, news traveled faster than Wi-Fi, and anonymity was a luxury that simply didn't exist. Which meant, Evan realized belatedly, that his appearance at Henderson's grocery company picnic with a woman on his arm would not go unnoticed. Cedar Mill would have questions. Cedar Mill would have opinions. Cedar Mill would almost certainly have theories. He pushed the thought aside as he pulled into the parking lot of Lena's apartment complex. A modest building on the edge of town, the kind of place that housed people who were getting by but not getting ahead. Her unit was on the 2nd floor, and he could see her silhouette moving behind the curtains as he killed the engine. "Is this where she lives?" Mia asked, craning her neck to see. "This is it. It's smaller than our house. Apartments usually are." "Does she get lonely, living by herself?" The question hit Evan somewhere unexpected. He thought about last night, about Lena curled in his armchair describing a life that had been whittled down to survival mode, about the way her voice had trembled when she talked about needing something she couldn't earn on her own. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe we should ask her." They climbed the stairs together, Mia's hand in his, and he knocked on the door with a heart that was beating far too fast for a Saturday morning. When Lena opened it, something in his chest stuttered and reset. She was wearing a yellow sundress that made her look like summer itself, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual practical ponytail. She'd put on makeup, subtle, just enough to soften the circles under her eyes and bring color to her cheeks. She looked, Evan thought, like someone who had decided to believe that today might actually go well. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy in a way she hadn't been the night before. "Hi." The word came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat. "You look nice." "Thank you." She smiled, and it transformed her face. "You clean up pretty well yourself. And Mia, look at you. Is that a tiara?" Mia touched her plastic crown with obvious pride. "It's my favorite. I wore it because today is special." Something flickered across Lena's expression. Vulnerability, maybe, or the beginning of something she wasn't ready to name. "It is special, isn't it? I'm really glad you're coming with us." "Me too." Mia beamed. Daddy says there might be three-legged races. Oh, there will definitely be three-legged races, and probably an egg and spoon race too, and watermelon eating contests. Watermelon! Mia bounced on her toes. Can I do the watermelon contest? You can do whatever you want. Lena's smile widened, becoming something genuine and warm. Today is going to be fun. She stepped out onto the landing and locked her door, and for a moment the three of them stood there in the morning light, an unlikely grouping of strangers about to pretend they were something more. Evan felt the weight of what he'd agreed to settling onto his shoulders, not heavy exactly, but present, real in a way it hadn't been last night. Ready? Lena asked, and the question seemed to hold more than its surface meaning. Ready, Evan confirmed. They walked down the stairs together, and as they reached his truck, Lena's hand brushed against his. It was accidental, or at least it seemed accidental, but neither of them pulled away. Instead, almost without thinking, Evan's fingers interlaced with hers. It felt, he realized with something like surprise, completely natural. "This okay?" he murmured so quietly that Mia, already scrambling into the truck's back seat, wouldn't hear. Lena looked down at their joined hands, then up at him. Her eyes were bright with something he couldn't quite read. "More than okay," she said softly. "It's perfect." They climbed into the truck, Lena in the passenger seat, Mia buckled in the back with her plastic horses that she'd insisted on bringing, and Evan started the engine. The radio came on, playing something old and familiar, and Mia began humming along from the back seat. It felt, Evan thought, almost like being a family. The thought should have scared him. It didn't. Darshal. Lake Crescent spread out before them like a painting, its surface mirror still and reflecting the mountains that rose behind it. The company picnic had commandeered the North Shore, where a pavilion stood surrounded by picnic tables draped in red and white checked cloths. A banner proclaiming Henderson's Grocery Family Day 2024 stretched between two poles, and the smell of grilling meat drifted through the air. Evan counted at least 40 people milling around, employees in casual clothes, children running between the tables, a small DJ booth playing cheerful music that competed with the shrieks of kids discovering the inflatable bounce house. "Big crowd," he observed, squeezing Lena's hand as they walked from the parking area. "Bigger than last year." She took a deep breath, visibly steadying herself. "Okay, we can do this. We rehearsed. We're prepared. We just have to be natural." "Natural," Evan repeated. "Right. Just follow my lead. And remember, 2 squeezes for more affection, 3 for back off." He smiled, trying to project a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I remember." "Good." She squeezed his hand once, not a signal, he realized, but something else. Gratitude, maybe. Or solidarity. They walked into the picnic together, and within 30 seconds, the staring began. It was subtle at first. Glances that lingered a beat too long, heads tilting together for whispered conversations, eyes tracking them as they made their way toward the pavilion. Then the whispers became murmurs, and the murmurs became a wave of attention that seemed to ripple outward like a stone dropped into still water. "There she is!" A woman in her 50s descended upon them with the force of a small hurricane, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing a blazer, even at a picnic. "Lena, darling, you made it, and this must be the famous Evan." "Carolyn." Lena's smile was bright and fixed. "This is Evan Brooks." "Evan, this is Carolyn Mitchell, my supervisor." Evan extended his free hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Lena talks about you all the time." Carolyn's handshake was firm, appraising. "Does she? All good things, I hope." "Nothing but." He smiled the smile he used with difficult customers. Warm, steady, utterly unrevealing. "She says you've been instrumental in her career growth." "Well, that's lovely to hear." Carolyn's eyes were moving between them, cataloging details. "And this must be little Mia. Lena's told us so much about you, sweetheart." Mia, who had been hiding behind Evan's leg, peeked out with cautious curiosity. "You know my name?" "Of course I do. Lena's practically family here, and that means you are too." Carolyn's voice softened in that way adults sometimes did when addressing children they wanted to impress. "I hear you're quite the artist. Lena showed us one of your drawings once." Evan glanced at Lena in surprise. She hadn't mentioned sharing anything about Mia except the basic facts of her existence. Lena's cheeks colored slightly. You drew that picture of the rainbow horses, she explained quietly. When you came into the store with your dad that time, you left it on the counter and I kept it. Mia's eyes went wide with the particular delight of having been remembered. You kept my drawing? It was beautiful. Lena's voice was soft. It's still on my refrigerator. Something warm bloomed in Evan's chest. Something he couldn't quite name but that felt important. This woman, this stranger who had walked into his garage barely 24 hours ago, had kept his daughter's discarded artwork, had shown it to her coworkers, had, in her elaborate fabrication of a relationship, made Mia part of the story in ways that were tender and true. Well, Carolyn said, clapping her hands with an energy that broke the moment, let's get you all settled in. The food will be ready soon, and there's plenty of activities for the little ones. Evan, the other partners are setting up for the volleyball tournament if you're interested. And Lena, she paused, something calculating entering her expression. We should talk later about the position. I have some news. Lena's grip on Evan's hand tightened almost imperceptibly. Good news? Very good news. Carolyn smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. But we'll discuss it properly. Go, enjoy the day, mingle. Show this handsome fiancé of yours off to everyone who's been dying to meet him. She swept away toward another cluster of arrivals, leaving Lena and Evan standing in her wake like survivors of a particularly friendly natural disaster. That was intense, Lena finished. That was Carolyn. She's definitely something. She's the reason I'm here. The reason you're here. Lena's voice was tight. If I can just get through today. Hey. Evan turned to face her, cupping her chin gently with his free hand. It was an impulsive gesture, more intimate than he'd intended, but something about the panic in her eyes demanded response. You're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Just breathe. For a moment, Lena just looked at him, really looked, the way she had in his living room when she'd talked about watching him be kind to strangers in grocery store parking lots. Then she exhaled slowly, and some of the tension left her shoulders. You're good at this, she murmured. The pretending. Maybe it's not entirely pretending. The words escaped before he could stop them, and they hung in the air between them, carrying weight neither had anticipated. Lena's lips parted slightly, but before she could respond, Mia's voice cut through the moment. Daddy, look! A bounce house! Evan turned to find his daughter pointing at the inflatable castle with the kind of reverent awe usually reserved for religious experiences. Can I go? Please, there are other kids there, and they look nice, and I'll be careful, and go! Evan laughed, releasing her hand. But stay where I can see you. Mia was gone before he finished the sentence, her purple dress and plastic tiara disappearing into the crowd of children swarming the bounce house. Evan watched her go with the particular alertness of a single parent in unfamiliar territory, tracking her movements, noting escape routes, cataloging potential dangers. She's going to be fine, Lena said softly. This is a grocery store picnic, not a war zone. Old habits. But he allowed himself to relax slightly as Mia emerged at the bounce house entrance, already deep in conversation with a girl about her age. She's not usually this outgoing with new people. Maybe she senses that today is different. Maybe. Evan turned back to Lena and found her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. What? Nothing. She shook her head, but she was smiling. Just thank you again for being here, for being you. I haven't done anything yet. You've done plenty. Her hand found his again, and this time when their fingers interlaced, it felt like a choice rather than an accident. Come on, let me introduce you to the people who've been hearing about you for 3 months. Try not to be more charming than I described. I'll do my best. They walked into the picnic together, and Evan felt something shift, a gear catching, a lock clicking into place. Whatever happened next, whatever this day brought, he was no longer standing on the outside looking in. He was part of the story now. And despite every logical instinct telling him to be careful, to protect himself, to remember that this was temporary and transactional and would end when the picnic did, Despite all of that, some small part of him hoped the story might turn out differently than either of them had planned. The introductions began almost immediately, a parade of faces and names that blurred together in Evan's mind, even as he smiled and shook hands and repeated the same basic script again and again. Yes, he was the mechanic from downtown. Yes, they'd been together since March. Yes, he was absolutely certain that Lena was the one. The lies came easier than he'd expected. Perhaps because they weren't entirely lies. He was a mechanic. They had met in March. Technically, yesterday was March in some parallel universe where time worked differently. And as for Lena being the one, well, the jury was still out on what that phrase even meant anymore. So you're the mystery man. A woman with bright red hair and an even brighter smile materialized at his elbow, dragging a reluctant-looking husband behind her. I'm Patty, from the bakery section. I've been telling Lena for months that she needed to bring you around. You're even more handsome than she described. Evan felt heat creep up his neck. She's been generous in her descriptions. Generous nothing. She said you had kind eyes and strong hands, and honey, she was underselling both. Patty winked at Lena, who looked like she wanted the earth to open and swallow her whole. Hold on to this one, Lena. Good men are hard to find. Don't I know it, Lena murmured, and something in her voice made Evan glance at her sharply. The morning unfolded in a rhythm of small conversations and careful performances. Evan learned to read Lena's subtle cues, the way she leaned into him when she needed support, the slight tension in her shoulders when a question got too personal, the grateful squeeze of her fingers when he deflected a particularly probing inquiry with humor or charm. He also learned things about her that hadn't come up in their rehearsal sessions. How her coworkers genuinely liked her, how the younger employees looked up to her as a mentor, how she'd covered shifts for single mothers and traded holidays with people who had family obligations, always with a smile and never asking for anything in return. She trained me when I first started, a young man named Marcus told Evan while Lena was fetching drinks. I was terrible. Couldn't work the register, couldn't stock shelves without knocking things over, couldn't remember where anything was. Most people would have given up on me. But Lena, she stayed late every night for a month, going over everything until I got it right. Wouldn't let me fail. That sounds like her, Evan said, and realized he meant it. She never talks about herself, though, never complains, never asks for help. It's like she thinks she has to do everything alone. Marcus shook his head. I'm glad she found you, man. She deserves someone in her corner. Evan watched Lena across the pavilion, where she was carefully balancing 3 cups of lemonade while navigating through a cluster of children. The sunlight caught her hair, turning it golden at the edges, and she was laughing at something one of the kids had said. She deserves someone in her corner. The words echoed in his chest, settling into spaces he hadn't known were empty. Mia appeared at his side, breathless and flushed with excitement. Daddy! Daddy! There's going to be a 3-legged race and I need a partner, and can it be Lena? Please? The other kids have their moms and I want Lena to be my partner. Please, please, please? Evan's heart squeezed at the casual cruelty of, the other kids have their moms, even though Mia delivered it without any apparent pain. She'd learned early that families came in different shapes, that the absence of a mother was just another fact of life, like the color of her eyes or the way her hair curled when it rained. You should ask Lena, he said gently. It's her choice. Mia was already running toward Lena before he finished speaking, her purple dress flying behind her like a banner. Evan watched as she skidded to a stop in front of Lena, watched Lena's face transform from surprise to delight to something softer and more complicated as Mia made her breathless request. Lena looked up, meeting Evan's eyes across the crowded pavilion, and something passed between them, a question and an answer, a permission and a promise. Then she was nodding, kneeling down to Mia's level, and Mia was throwing her arms around Lena's neck with the fierce abandon of a child who had decided, with absolute certainty, that this person was safe. Evan felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd been holding together for years with sheer force of will. The 3-legged race was announced 20 minutes later, and Evan found a spot near the finish line where he could watch without interfering. Lena and Mia stood at the starting line, their legs awkwardly bound together with a strip of fabric, giggling as they tried to coordinate their movements. On your mark, the announcer called. Get set, go! Chaos erupted. Half the pairs immediately stumbled and fell, tangling in their own limbs. Others lurched forward in ungainly hops, covering ground through sheer determination rather than skill. But Lena and Mia moved like they'd been practicing for weeks. They didn't win. A father-son pair beat them by a full 3 seconds, crossing the finish line to triumphant cheers. But Evan barely noticed, because Mia and Lena were laughing so hard they could barely stand, collapsed in a heap of tangled limbs and absolute joy, and the sight of it hit him with the force of a physical blow. This is what it could be like. The thought was dangerous. He knew it was dangerous. This was one day, one performance, one carefully constructed illusion designed to protect a woman he'd met yesterday from professional consequences he didn't fully understand. But watching Lena untangle her leg from Mia's, watching his daughter look up at this stranger with something that looked terrifyingly like love, watching the way Lena's hand lingered on Mia's hair as she helped her stand, it didn't feel like an illusion. They're naturals, a voice said beside him, and Evan turned to find Carolyn Mitchell watching the scene with an expression he couldn't quite read. They seem to get along, he said carefully. More than that. Carolyn's eyes were sharp, assessing. Your daughter trusts her. Children don't fake that. No, they don't. Carolyn was quiet for a moment, watching as Lena and Mia made their way back toward the pavilion, still giggling about something Evan couldn't hear. Then she turned to face him directly, and something in her expression shifted. How long have you really been together, Mr. Brooks? The question landed like a punch to the solar plexus. Evan felt his careful composure waver, felt the ground shift beneath his feet. I'm sorry? I asked how long you've really been together. Carolyn's voice was calm, almost conversational. Because I've watched Lena talk about you for 3 months, and I've watched her with you today, and something doesn't quite add up. Evan's mind raced, searching for the right response, the right deflection. But before he could speak, Carolyn continued. She talks about you like you're a dream, like you're something she wished for so hard it came true. But when she looks at you, Carolyn paused, choosing her words with care. When she looks at you, there's surprise there, genuine surprise. Like she can't quite believe you're real. Maybe she can't. The words came out before Evan could stop them, rougher and more honest than he'd intended. Carolyn studied him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. A real smile. Warm and knowing and nothing like the sharp-edged expression she'd worn earlier. You know what I think, Mr. Brooks? I think the timeline doesn't matter nearly as much as what I'm seeing right now. And what I'm seeing right now is 2 people who are exactly where they're supposed to be. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Evan standing alone with his racing heart and his scattered thoughts, and the dawning realization that nothing about this day was going according to plan. Lena and Mia reached him a moment later, both of them glowing with exertion and happiness. Mia immediately launched into a detailed account of the race, complete with dramatic reenactments and sound effects, while Lena stood slightly apart, catching her breath. You okay? She asked quietly, her eyes searching his face. Carolyn just asked me how long we've really been together. Lena's face went pale. What did you tell her? Nothing. She walked away before I could answer. He paused, watching her carefully. But I think she already knows, Lena. Knows what? That something about our story doesn't quite fit. He reached for her hand, not because anyone was watching, but because it felt like the right thing to do. But she also said that the timeline doesn't matter as much as what she's seeing right now. What does that mean? I have no idea. He squeezed her fingers gently. But whatever happens, we're in this together. Okay? Lena looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face, and something in her expression shifted. A wall coming down, a door opening, a decision being made. Together, she repeated softly. I like the sound of that. The afternoon sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the picnic grounds as the event shifted into its later phases. The volleyball tournament began, and Evan found himself recruited onto a team despite his protest that he hadn't played since high school. Lena cheered from the sidelines, Mia beside her, both of them shouting encouragement that was more enthusiastic than technically accurate. "Set it, Daddy!" Mia yelled at one point when the ball was clearly on the other side of the net. "That's not how volleyball works, sweetheart," Evan called back, laughing. "Set it anyway." He did, inexplicably, manage to contribute to his team's victory, though he suspected it had more to do with luck than skill. As he walked off the court, sweaty and slightly sunburned, Lena appeared at his side with a cold bottle of water. "My hero," she teased, pressing the bottle into his hands. "Hardly. I barely knew what I was doing out there." "You looked like you knew exactly what you were doing." She was smiling, but there was something else in her eyes. Something warm and wondering that made his chest tight. "Mia's been talking about you non-stop, about how strong you are, how you never give up, how you're the best daddy in the whole world." "She's biased." "Maybe," Lena's voice dropped, becoming something softer and more private. "Or maybe she just sees you clearly, the way I'm starting to." The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Evan became acutely aware of how close she was standing, of the way the afternoon light turned her eyes to honey, of the slight catch in her breathing that matched the unsteady rhythm of his own heart. "Lena! Lena!" Carolyn's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "I need to speak with you, now, please." The warmth drained from Lena's face, replaced by something that looked like controlled panic. She glanced at Evan, then back at Carolyn, who was standing near the pavilion with an expression that gave nothing away. "It'll be fine," Evan said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "Whatever it is, it'll be fine." "Will you watch Mia?" "Of course." Lena squeezed his hand once, a genuine squeeze, not a signal, and walked toward Carolyn with the careful posture of someone approaching a firing squad. Evan watched her go, his stomach knotting with anxiety that surprised him with its intensity. He'd known this woman for barely 24 hours. He had no business feeling this invested in her success, this worried about her future, this desperate for things to work out the way she needed them to. And yet, Mia tugged at his hand. "Daddy, where's Lena going?" "She has to talk to her boss for a minute. She'll be back." "Is she in trouble?" Evan looked down at his daughter's upturned face, at the concern creasing her small forehead, and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the situation. This wasn't just about helping a stranger anymore. Somehow, in the space of a single day, Lena had become someone his daughter cared about, someone whose happiness mattered. "I don't know, sweetheart," he admitted, "but whatever happens, we're going to be here for her. Okay?" Mia nodded solemnly. "Okay, Daddy, because that's what friends do." "Yeah." Evan's voice was rough. "That's what friends do." The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Evan and Mia waited near the pavilion, trying to look casual, while anxiety coiled tighter and tighter in Evan's chest. He could see Lena and Carolyn through the pavilion windows, seated at a table in what looked like intense conversation. Lena's body language shifted from defensive to confused to something he couldn't quite identify. He wanted to burst in there, to stand beside her, to face whatever was coming together instead of leaving her to handle it alone. But this wasn't his fight. He was just a prop in a performance, a borrowed boyfriend for a borrowed day. His role was to wait and watch and hope for the best. The pavilion door opened and Lena emerged. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, her hands visibly trembling. She walked toward Evan with the careful steps of someone navigating unfamiliar terrain, and when she reached him, she stopped, seemingly unable to speak. "Lena?" His hands found her shoulders, steadying her. "What happened? What did she say?" Lena opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "She offered me the position," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Relief flooded through Evan so quickly it nearly knocked him off his feet. "That's wonderful. That's exactly what you wanted." "No." Lena shook her head, and something in her expression made the relief curdle into confusion. "You don't understand. She offered me the position, but she also—" Another deep breath like she was gathering courage. "She asked me about us, about our relationship, about how we really met." The ground shifted beneath Evan's feet. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." Lena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I told her everything. I couldn't keep lying, Evan. Not after today. Not after everything. I looked at her and I looked at you through that window, and I thought about Mia asking if I was going to be there for her father, and I couldn't do it anymore. Evan's mind reeled, trying to process the implications. You told her the engagement was fake? I told her I made it up because I was desperate, because I'd been passed over so many times I'd lost hope of ever moving forward. I told her about walking into your garage yesterday, about asking a stranger to pretend to be my fiancé because I had no one else to turn to. I told her, Lena's voice cracked. I told her that somewhere in the middle of all this pretending, something real started to happen. Something I wasn't expecting and don't know how to handle but can't pretend isn't there. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them had anticipated when this whole insane adventure began. And what did she say? Evan asked, his voice rough. A smile broke through Lena's tears, small and wondering and so beautiful it made his chest ache. She said she knew. She knew? She knew the engagement wasn't real. She's known for weeks, apparently. Something about the way I talked about you. Too perfect, too rehearsed, like I was describing a character instead of a person. Lena laughed, a watery sound that held more joy than grief. But she offered me the promotion anyway. She said she wasn't promoting me because I was engaged. She was promoting me because I was the best person for the job, and she'd been a fool to let outdated ideas about stability blind her to that fact. Evan stared at her, trying to reconcile this information with everything he'd thought he understood about the situation. So, all of this was unnecessary. The whole elaborate scheme, the borrowed fiancé, the lies, none of it mattered in the end. I could have just been myself, and it would have been enough. Another tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling now, really smiling. Except then I never would have walked into your garage. I never would have met you. I never would have spent an afternoon watching your daughter fall asleep in your lap while you talked about love like it was something that might still be possible. Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. And I think meeting you might have been the point all along. The noise of the picnic faded to a distant hum. The other guests, the games, the music, all of it became background noise to the small, quiet universe that existed between them in this moment. Lena? Evan's voice was rough, stripped of everything except honesty. I don't know what I'm doing here. I haven't let myself feel anything for anyone in years. Since Sarah left, I've been in survival mode, just keeping my head down, raising Mia, keeping the garage afloat. Anything more than that felt dangerous. I know. Her hand came up to rest against his chest, right over his racing heart. I've been doing the same thing, building walls so high I forgot there was anything on the other side worth seeing. But today the walls came down. She said it simply, like it was an obvious truth. For both of us, I think. Mia appeared between them, apparently tired of being ignored. Why is Lena crying? Is she sad? No, sweetheart. Evan pulled his daughter close with one arm while keeping his other hand on Lena's shoulder. She's not sad. Sometimes people cry when they're happy too. That doesn't make any sense. No, Lena agreed, laughing through her tears. It really doesn't. Mia studied her with the intense scrutiny of a 7-year-old trying to decode adult behavior. Then, with the decisive certainty that only children possess, she reached up and wiped a tear from Lena's cheek. There, she said firmly. All better. Now can we get ice cream? I saw a truck over there and they have sprinkles. The tension broke like a fever, and suddenly all three of them were laughing, at the absurdity of the moment, at the beautiful strangeness of how they'd ended up here, at the simple clarity of a child who knew that ice cream was the solution to most problems. Ice cream sounds perfect, Evan said, finding Lena's hand with his own. What do you say? I say yes. Lena's fingers interlaced with his, fitting together like they'd been doing it for years. I say absolutely yes. They walked toward the ice cream truck together, the three of them, and if people stared, Evan didn't notice. If whispers followed in their wake, he didn't care. All that mattered was the warmth of Lena's hand in his, the sound of Mia chattering happily about sprinkle preferences, and the strange, wonderful feeling of possibility that had cracked open inside his chest. The lie had led them here. To this moment, to this connection, to this unexpected family taking shape in the afternoon light. And somehow, impossibly, the lie had become the truest thing either of them had ever done. The ice cream truck line was long, filled with sticky-fingered children and their patient parents, but Evan didn't mind the wait. It gave him time to process everything that had happened, to let the reality of it settle into his bones. Mia had decided, after much deliberation, on a vanilla cone with rainbow sprinkles and chocolate sauce. "Because I can't choose just one topping," she'd explained seriously, as if this were a matter requiring significant justification. Lena had ordered a simple strawberry cone, and Evan had gotten chocolate. Boring, according to Mia, but he'd never been one for elaborate dessert choices. They found a patch of grass near the lake, slightly apart from the main picnic area, and settled down to enjoy their ice cream while the afternoon stretched golden around them. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and a family of ducks paddled lazily near the shore, occasionally squabbling over invisible territorial disputes. "Daddy, look!" Mia pointed at the ducks with her ice cream cone, sending a small avalanche of sprinkles onto the grass. "Baby ducks!" "Ducklings," Evan corrected automatically. "Duck babies," Mia insisted, which was, he supposed, technically accurate. Lena was watching them with an expression Evan had started to recognize, soft and wondering, like she was seeing something precious that she'd thought was out of reach. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly, while Mia was distracted by the ducklings' antics. "Anything." "How did you know? With Sarah, I mean. How did you know she was going to leave?" The question surprised him, both in its directness and in how little it hurt to consider. There had been a time when any mention of Sarah felt like pressing on a fresh bruise. Now it was more like tracing the outline of an old scar, present but no longer painful. "I didn't," he admitted. "Not until she told me. Looking back, I can see the signs I missed, the way she'd go quiet sometimes, the way she'd look at Mia with more confusion than love. But at the time, I thought we were figuring it out, learning how to be parents together. I didn't realize she'd already decided she didn't want to learn." That must have been devastating. It was. He watched Mia laugh at something the ducklings were doing, her whole body vibrating with delight. But it was also clarifying? Is that the right word? "When Sarah left, I stopped pretending. Stopped trying to make something work that was never going to work. I just focused on what was real and what mattered, being the best father I could be, keeping the business running, surviving. And now?" He turned to look at her fully, taking in the ice cream melting slowly down her cone, the stray strand of hair the wind had blown across her cheek, the vulnerability in her eyes that she was no longer trying to hide. "Now I'm starting to think maybe survival isn't enough." The words came slowly, each one carefully chosen. "Maybe there's supposed to be more than just getting through each day. Maybe the walls I built to protect myself were also keeping out the things I actually needed." Lena reached up to tuck the strand of hair behind her ear, but her hand was trembling slightly. "What things?" "Connection. Partnership. Someone to share the load with." He paused, gathering courage for the next words. "Someone to come home to at the end of the day. Someone who sees me, not just as Mia's dad or the guy who fixes cars, but as me." "I see you." The words were barely above a whisper. "I've been seeing you for months, Evan, before I ever worked up the nerve to walk into your garage, watching you be patient with your daughter, watching you be kind to strangers, watching you move through the world like a man who had given up on being noticed, but deserved to be noticed anyway." "Lena, let me finish, please." She set down her ice cream cone, giving him her full attention. "I walked into your garage because I was desperate, and you seemed safe. But I'm sitting here now because somewhere in the last 24 hours, you became more than safe. You became someone I don't want to walk away from." The confession hung between them, fragile and brave, and Evan felt something inside him shift irrevocably, a door opening that could never be closed again. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "The pretending is over. Your boss knows the truth. There's no reason for us to keep doing this." Lena's smile was small and slightly uncertain. "What if we stopped pretending but didn't stop doing this?" "You mean I mean, what if we tried for real? Not a performance, not a scheme, just two people who found each other in the strangest possible way, trying to figure out if there's something worth building here. It was insane. They'd known each other for barely a day. They'd spent most of that day lying to everyone around them. There was no logical reason to believe that anything real could grow from such artificial beginnings. And yet, Mia had wandered back over, her ice cream now more of a sticky mess than a cone. "I'm done," she announced. "Can we go play with the ducks?" "Ducks are wild animals, sweetheart. We can watch them, but we shouldn't touch them." "Okay." She seemed to accept this without argument. "Lena, will you watch the ducks with me?" Lena looked at Evan, a question in her eyes. He nodded, something warm unfurling in his chest. "I would love to watch the ducks with you," Lena said, and when Mia grabbed her hand to pull her toward the water's edge, she went willingly, looking back over her shoulder at Evan with an expression that said everything words couldn't capture. He watched them go. His daughter and this woman who had stumbled into their lives so unexpectedly and felt something settle into place. Something that felt remarkably like hope. The picnic wound down as the afternoon faded toward evening, and people began gathering their things, collecting tired children, saying prolonged goodbyes that are the hallmark of small-town social events. Evan found himself shaking hands and accepting invitations to future gatherings, each interaction layered with the strange awareness that these people now knew him as Lena's partner, whether or not that label was technically accurate anymore. Carolyn found them as they were preparing to leave, approaching with the purposeful stride of a woman who had one more piece of business to conclude. "Lena, I just wanted to confirm. The position starts Monday. 9 a.m., my office. We'll go over everything then." She turned her sharp gaze to Evan. "And you, Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming today. Whatever the circumstances that brought you here, I'm glad you made it." "So am I," Evan said, and meant it. Carolyn's expression softened into something almost warm. "I've known Lena for 5 years, watched her work harder than anyone else in that store, never asking for recognition, never complaining about the unfairness of being passed over. She deserved this promotion long before any fictional fiancé entered the picture." She paused, glancing at Lena with something like fondness. "But I also watched her change over the past few months, lighter somehow, more hopeful. I assumed it was because she had someone special in her life. Turns out I was right, just not in the way I thought." "I don't understand," Lena said. "The person you've been building yourself up for isn't some man I'm meeting for the first time today. It's you, Lena. The person you've become while imagining what your life could look like. The promotion I'm giving you isn't a reward for having a stable relationship. It's recognition of the fact that you've finally started believing you deserve good things." Carolyn smiled. The fiancé was always beside the point. She walked away before either of them could respond, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind her. "Did that just happen?" Lena asked after a moment. "I think so. She basically just said the whole scheme was unnecessary, that I could have gotten the promotion on my own the whole time." "That seems to be the implication, yes." Lena was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she started to laugh, genuine, full-bodied laughter that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. "I went to such extreme lengths," she gasped between laughs. "I literally walked into a stranger's garage and asked him to pretend to love me. I fabricated an entire relationship, complete with a proposal story and a timeline. I dragged you and your daughter into my mess. And the whole time, none of it even mattered." "It mattered," Evan said quietly, and something in his voice made her laughter fade. "Maybe not in the way you thought, but it mattered." She looked at him, really looked, and he watched the understanding dawn in her eyes. "Because it brought us here. Because it brought us here." Mia appeared at their side, interrupting the moment with the obliviousness of childhood exhaustion. "Daddy, I'm tired. Can we go home?" "Yeah, sweetheart. We can go home." Evan lifted her easily, settling her against his hip. "Say goodbye to everyone." Mia waved a limp hand in the general direction of the remaining picnickers. "Bye, everyone." The walk back to the truck was quiet, peaceful in a way that felt earned. Mia's head drooped against Evan's shoulder, her breathing growing heavy with approaching sleep. Lena walked beside them, close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed. "So," Evan said as they reached the truck. What happens now? Now? Lena helped him settle Mia into the back seat, buckling her in with gentle hands while the little girl murmured something incoherent about ducks and ice cream. Now I think we take it one day at a time. Get to know each other properly. Figure out if what we felt today was real or just adrenaline and circumstance. And if it was real, she straightened, meeting his eyes across the truck's bench seat. Then we figure out what that means. Together. Together. The word felt different now than it had this morning, when it was just a rehearsed line in their performance. Now it carried weight, promise, possibility. Evan walked around to the driver's side, but before he could open the door, Lena caught his arm. He turned to find her standing close, closer than the performance had ever required, her eyes searching his face like she was looking for something important. "Thank you," she said softly. "For saying yes when any reasonable person would have said no. For being kind when you had no obligation to be. For letting me borrow your life for a day and somehow making it feel like I might actually belong in it. Lena, I know we barely know each other. I know this is crazy. I know there are 100 reasons why this shouldn't work." She took a shaky breath. "But I also know that I haven't felt this hopeful about anything in years. And I don't want to lose that feeling. I don't want to lose this." Evan reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face in a gesture that felt both impossibly intimate and completely natural. "I'm not going anywhere. Promise?" "Promise." She smiled then, a real smile, unguarded and bright. And something in Evan's chest unlocked, something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it could move. "I should get Mia home," he said reluctantly. "But tomorrow, would you want to come over for dinner? Nothing fancy, just regular life. The kind we don't have to rehearse or perform." "I would love that. And maybe you could bring your car by the shop. I still want to check those brake pads." Lena laughed, and the sound was like sunshine after rain. "It's a date." "Yeah," Evan grinned, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I guess it is." The drive home was peaceful, painted in the soft colors of sunset. Mia slept soundly in the back seat, her plastic tiara askew, her face still bearing traces of ice cream and sunshine. Evan kept the radio off, preferring the quiet, letting the day's events settle into his memory like sediment finding the bottom of a river. When he pulled into his driveway, the garage sat waiting in the dusk, its familiar outlines unchanged. But everything else felt different. The house no longer looked like a refuge from the world. It looked like a beginning, a place where new stories might unfold. He carried Mia inside, put her to bed still in her purple dress because he didn't have the heart to wake her, and stood for a moment in her doorway watching her sleep. "Big day, kiddo," he whispered. "Biggest day in a long time." Mia murmured something in her sleep and rolled over, one hand clutching the plastic horse she'd smuggled into bed. Evan pulled the door mostly closed, leaving a crack for the hallway light the way she liked, and walked back downstairs. The house was quiet, but not lonely. Not tonight. His phone buzzed, a text message. "Lena, thank you for today, for everything. I can't stop smiling." He typed back, "Neither can I. See you tomorrow." Her response came quickly. "Tomorrow. I like the sound of that." Evan set the phone down and looked around his living room, at the photographs on the walls, at the toys scattered across the floor, at all the evidence of a life he'd built from scratch, after everything he'd thought he'd have was taken away. Tomorrow. Such a simple word. Such an impossible weight of hope contained in 2 syllables. He'd spent years convinced that his story had already been written, that the plot had been set in stone the day Sarah walked out, leaving him with a baby and a broken heart, and nothing but determination to keep going. But today had proven him wrong. Today had shown him that stories could take unexpected turns, that strangers could become something more, that a desperate lie could become the foundation for an honest truth. Lena Moore had walked into his garage looking for a fake fiancé. What she'd found instead, what they'd both found, was something neither of them had been brave enough to hope for. A second chance. Evan turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to his bedroom, carrying that thought with him like a candle in the darkness. Tomorrow, Lena would come for dinner. They would eat something simple and talk about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Mia would probably dominate the conversation with stories about ducks and ice cream and her new favorite person in the world. And slowly, carefully, they would begin the work of turning a single impossible day into something that could last. It wouldn't be easy. Real relationships never were. There would be awkward moments and misunderstandings, and the inevitable growing pains of two people learning to fit their lives together. But for the first time in years, Evan was looking forward to the challenge. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. The morning light spilled through Evan's kitchen window like honey, thick and golden and full of promise. He stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with the practiced ease of a father who had learned early that breakfast was the foundation of everything that followed. The rhythm was familiar, comforting, batter sizzling, spatula turning, the scent of something warm and good filling the small kitchen. But today the rhythm carried a different energy. Today was the first day of something new. Mia appeared in the doorway, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, her hair a wild tangle of curls that would require negotiation and probably tears before they could be tamed into anything presentable. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with the dancing horses, and clutching the plastic tiara she'd worn to the picnic yesterday, as if she'd been sleeping with it and couldn't bear to let it go. "Daddy, is Lena coming today?" The question landed with more weight than Mia probably intended. "Tonight, sweetheart. She's coming for dinner." Mia's face split into a grin so wide it seemed to occupy her entire body. "Really? Really, really? Really, really? What are we going to have? Can we have spaghetti? Lena probably likes spaghetti. Everyone likes spaghetti. Can I help make it? I'm very good at stirring." Evan laughed, the sound coming easier than it had and longer than he could remember. "We can have spaghetti. And yes, you can help stir. This is the best day ever." Mia climbed onto her chair at the kitchen table, her tiara slightly askew. "Yesterday was also the best day ever, and now today is too. I'm having a lot of best days." "That's a good problem to have." "Daddy?" Her voice had shifted, becoming smaller, more uncertain. "Is Lena going to keep coming over, or was yesterday just a special thing?" The question hit Evan in the chest, finding all the soft places he thought he'd armored over. He set down his spatula and turned to face his daughter fully, giving her the attention that questions like this deserved. "I hope she keeps coming over," he said honestly. "I'd like that. But we're going to take things slow, okay? Get to know each other properly. Make sure everyone's happy." "I'm happy," Mia said immediately. "Lena makes you smile different." "Smile different? Like with your whole face instead of just your mouth. I like it." Evan didn't have words for what that observation did to him, so he just crossed the kitchen and wrapped his daughter in a hug that said everything his voice couldn't manage. She smelled like sleep and strawberry shampoo and possibility, and he held on longer than was probably necessary, trying to memorize the feeling of this moment. Everything was about to change. He could feel it in his bones, in the electricity that seemed to hum just beneath the surface of ordinary morning routines. And for the first time in years, the prospect of change didn't terrify him. It felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. The day passed in a blur of anticipation that Evan tried unsuccessfully to hide. He spent the morning in the garage, catching up on work he'd neglected over the weekend, but his mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. The conversation he might have, the silences that might stretch between them, comfortable or awkward, or something in between. The way Lena's hand had felt in his, and the way she'd looked at him like he was something worth seeing. At noon, Mrs. Patterson came by to drop off a casserole as a thank you for the jump start he'd given her months ago, and ended up staying for an hour to catch up on neighborhood gossip. Evan learned that the Hendersons were putting in a pool, that the old Miller property had finally sold to a young couple from Seattle, and that everyone was talking about Evan Brooks showing up at the Hendersons' grocery picnic with a beautiful woman and a lot of hand-holding. "Small town," Mrs. Patterson said, her eyes twinkling. "Word travels fast. So who is she?" "Her name's Lena. She works at Henderson's." Evan wiped his hands on a rag, suddenly aware of how much grease had accumulated on his forearms. "We're getting to know each other." "Getting to know each other," Mrs. Patterson repeated the phrase with the knowing tone of someone who had lived long enough to recognize the beginnings of things. "Well, it's about time. You've been alone too long, Evan. A man like you shouldn't be alone." "I'm not alone. I have Mia." "You know what I mean? She patted his arm with a grandmother's gentle authority. Children are wonderful, but they grow up. They leave. You need someone who chooses to stay. The words echoed in Evan's mind long after Mrs. Patterson had gone, carrying her casserole dish and her well-intentioned wisdom. Someone who chooses to stay. He thought about Sarah, who had chosen to leave. He thought about his father, who had stayed until his heart gave out. He thought about Lena, standing in his garage 2 days ago with desperation in her eyes and a question that had upended his entire life. Was she someone who would choose to stay? Did he want her to be? The questions had no easy answers, but somehow that felt okay. Some questions were meant to be lived into, not solved. By 4 o'clock, Evan had cleaned the kitchen twice, reorganized the living room furniture, and changed his shirt 3 times. Mia found this last detail hilarious and demanded to help him choose, ultimately selecting a green button-down that she declared made him look like someone from one of her storybooks about handsome princes. "You're not wearing a crown, though," she observed critically. "Princes usually wear crowns." "I think I'll skip the crown for tonight." "Your choice." She shrugged with the magnanimous air of someone granting permission. But it would really complete the look. At 5:30, Evan started the spaghetti sauce, his mother's recipe, passed down through generations of Brooks women and now maintained by the sole surviving male heir, who had learned to cook out of necessity and discovered somewhere along the way that he actually enjoyed it. Mia stood on her step stool beside him, stirring with the intense concentration of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. "More basil?" she asked, hovering a pinch of dried herbs over the simmering pot. "Perfect amount." She added it with a flourish, then leaned over to inhale the steam. "Smells like magic." "That's the secret ingredient." "Magic?" "Love." He said it without thinking, the word slipping out before he could catch it, and Mia looked up at him with an expression that was somehow both innocent and knowing. "Is that why you're making it for Lena? Because of love?" Evan's spatula paused mid-stir. It's complicated, sweetheart. We're still getting to know each other, remember?" "Okay." Mia didn't sound convinced, but she let the matter drop. "But Daddy, I hope she loves your spaghetti, because I think maybe you love her already, and it would be sad if she didn't like your cooking." Children, Evan reflected, had a terrifying ability to cut through every defense adults constructed and arrive at the truth without any of the careful navigation that made adult conversations feel safe. "I hope she likes it too," he said quietly. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, and Evan felt his heart lurch with a force that was frankly embarrassing for a 34-year-old man who had seen his share of difficult situations. He wiped his hands on a dish towel, took a breath that didn't quite steady him, and walked to the door with Mia bouncing excitedly at his heels. Lena stood on his porch, and for a moment, the sight of her knocked every thought out of his head. She was wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she was holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a bakery box in the other. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed, "trying too hard." Just a woman standing on his doorstep, looking at him like she'd been waiting all day for this moment too. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Mia, apparently tired of the adults standing there like statues, pushed past Evan and threw her arms around Lena's waist. "You came. Daddy said you would come, and you did." Lena laughed, that bright sound that Evan had been replaying in his memory all day. "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss spaghetti night for anything." "I helped make the sauce," Mia announced proudly. "I put in the basil and I stirred for a really long time, and Daddy said it was perfect." "It smells incredible." Lena looked up at Evan over Mia's head, and something in her expression made his chest tight. "Can I come in, or should I just stand out here admiring the aroma?" "Come in, come in." Evan stepped back, feeling suddenly aware of every detail of his home, the slightly worn carpet, the photographs on the walls, the evidence of a life lived modestly and without pretension. "It's not much, but it's perfect," Lena interrupted, stepping inside with Mia still attached to her like a small, enthusiastic barnacle. "It feels like a home. Like a real home, not a showroom." She handed him the wine and the bakery box, and her fingers brushed his during the exchange. Such a small contact, lasting barely a second, but it sent electricity racing up his arm. "Brownies," she explained, "from the bakery on Oak Street." I wasn't sure what you liked, but everyone likes brownies, right? Everyone likes brownies, Mia confirmed solemnly, especially me. Good to know. Lena smiled down at her. Then I definitely brought enough. Dinner was easy, in a way Evan hadn't expected. Conversation flowed naturally, jumping from topic to topic with the comfortable rhythm of people who were genuinely interested in each other's lives. Lena asked about the garage, and Evan found himself talking about his father, about the legacy he was trying to maintain, about the satisfaction of fixing things that other people had given up on. There's something healing about it, he admitted, twirling spaghetti around his fork. Taking something broken and making it work again. It feels like proof that not everything that falls apart has to stay apart. Lena watched him with an intensity that made him feel both seen and slightly exposed. You're talking about more than cars. Maybe. He set down his fork, meeting her gaze. We're all a little broken, aren't we? By life, by circumstances, by people who were supposed to love us and didn't. The trick is finding someone willing to help with the repairs. Or being willing to let them help. Her voice was soft. That's the harder part, I think. Letting someone see the broken pieces instead of hiding them. Is that what you've been doing? Hiding the broken pieces? For years. She glanced at Mia, who was absorbed in creating an elaborate sculpture from her remaining spaghetti, then back at Evan. After Derek, I convinced myself that I was fine on my own, that I didn't need anyone, that wanting to be loved was a weakness I could train myself out of. How's that working out for you? She laughed ruefully. About as well as you'd expect. I got really good at being alone, Evan. Really good at not needing things, or people, or hope. And then I walked into your garage with the most ridiculous request imaginable, and suddenly all those walls I'd built started feeling less like protection and more like a prison. Mia looked up from her spaghetti sculpture. What's a prison? It's a place where people get stuck, Lena explained gently, when they've made choices that trap them somewhere they can't get out of. Oh. Mia considered this. Like when I got stuck in my playhouse because the door was too small? Exactly like that, Lena smiled. Except sometimes the prison is in your head, not in real life, and getting out is harder because the walls are invisible. That sounds scary. It is scary. But you know what makes it less scary? Mia shook her head. Having people who help you find the door. The simple wisdom of the statement settled over the table like a blessing. Mia went back to her sculpture, seemingly satisfied with the explanation, but Evan and Lena's eyes stayed locked in silent conversation, speaking volumes that words couldn't carry. After dinner, they migrated to the living room while Mia demonstrated her extensive collection of plastic horses, each one with a name and a detailed backstory that she'd created over years of imaginative play. Lena listened with genuine attention, asking questions and making observations that made Mia glow with the particular joy of being taken seriously by an adult. This one is Princess Moonbeam, Mia explained, holding up a purple horse with a slightly battered mane. She's the leader of all the horses. She was born during a lunar eclipse, which is why she has magic powers. What kind of magic powers? She can make people tell the truth. Mia considered this. And also she can fly, but only on Tuesdays. Why only Tuesdays? Because that's when the wind is right. Mia said this as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Also, I decided that when I was 4 and now it's just the rule. Evan watched this exchange from his armchair, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the wine he'd been drinking. This was what he'd been afraid to hope for, this ordinary magic of connection, of someone who could slip into the spaces of his life like they'd always been there. Okay, sweetheart, he said eventually. Time for bed. The protest was immediate and dramatic. But Daddy, Lena just got here. Lena will come back. He looked at her, a question in his eyes. Won't you? Absolutely. Lena held out her hand for a high five from Mia. We have to finish the Princess Moonbeam saga. I need to know what happens with the dragon situation. The dragon is actually nice, Mia confided. He just has bad breath, and everyone misunderstands him. A classic tale of prejudice and redemption. Mia looked confused. It's about a dragon. Go brush your teeth, Evan said, suppressing a laugh. I'll be up in 5 minutes. Mia gave Lena one more hug, long and tight, the kind that children give when they've decided someone belongs in their heart, and then thundered up the stairs with all the subtlety of a small elephant. The silence that followed was comfortable, expectant. Lena settled back against the couch cushions, looking around the room with an expression that Evan couldn't quite read. "She's incredible," she said finally. "You've done such an amazing job with her." "I can't take all the credit. She came pre-installed with most of that personality." "Don't do that." Lena's voice was gentle but firm. "Don't minimize what you've accomplished. You raised her alone, Evan. You worked full-time, grieved the loss of your marriage, built a life from scratch, all while being a present, loving, engaged father. That's not nothing. That's everything." Evan didn't know what to say to that, so he focused on gathering the wine glasses from the coffee table, using the task as an excuse to process the emotion her words had stirred up. "I should get these washed before I put Mia to bed," he said. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll be back in a few minutes." The bedtime routine was compressed that night, condensed into the essential elements by Mia's exhaustion and Evan's awareness of the woman waiting downstairs. Teeth brushed, story selected, a short one, by mutual agreement, prayers said, to the universe, to the unnamed forces of good that they hoped were listening, and then the final tucking in that Mia insisted on with ritualistic precision. "Daddy?" Her voice caught him at the door, already heavy with approaching sleep. "Yeah, sweetheart? I like her. I really, really like her." "I know you do." "Do you like her too? Really, really?" Evan leaned against the doorframe, looking at his daughter in the soft glow of her nightlight, this small person who had become the center of his world, who had given his life purpose and meaning when everything else had fallen apart. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I really, really do." "Good." Mia smiled sleepily. "Then maybe she can stay." "Maybe she can." He closed the door gently and stood in the hallway for a moment, collecting himself. Then he walked back downstairs to where Lena was waiting and found her standing at the window, looking out at the darkened street. "Hey!" He came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect." She turned to face him, and there were tears in her eyes. Not sad tears, he realized, but something else, something overwhelming. "I was just thinking about how strange life is. 2 days ago, I was so desperate I asked a stranger to pretend to love me. And now I'm standing in his house, watching his daughter go to sleep, feeling like I've found something I didn't even know I was looking for." Life has a sense of humor sometimes. A twisted one. She laughed, wiping at her eyes. "Evan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." His stomach tightened with sudden apprehension. "Okay." "I've been thinking all day about yesterday, about Carolyn and the promotion and everything that happened, and I realized something that scared me." "What?" "I realized that I didn't just walk into your garage because I needed help. I walked in because I'd been watching you for months, building up this idea of who you were, and some part of me wanted to believe that you could be real, that someone like you actually existed." She took a shaky breath. "I created an imaginary fiancé, but the truth is I was describing you the whole time. Everything I told Carolyn about my perfect partner, the kindness, the patience, the way he treats his daughter, the quiet strength, it was all you. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." Evan felt the words land in his chest, rearranging something fundamental. "Lena, I'm not finished." She held up a hand, her voice trembling but determined. "What I'm trying to say is that this isn't casual for me. It can't be. I've already invested too much hope in the idea of you, and I'm terrified that the reality won't match up. That I've built you into something you can't possibly be, and you'll let me down the way everyone else has, and I'll have to start over again from a place that's even more broken than before. Is that what you're expecting? For me to let you down?" "It's what I've learned to expect from everyone." Her voice cracked. "My father left when I was 12. Derek promised forever and gave me 4 years. Every person I've ever trusted has eventually decided I wasn't worth staying for. So you stopped trusting. I stopped hoping." The distinction was important, Evan realized. Trust was active. Hope was the foundation beneath it. Without hope, trust couldn't even begin. He reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers the way he had at the picnic, the way that had started to feel like their particular language. "I can't promise I won't disappoint you," he said carefully. "I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say the wrong thing, or forget important dates, or be too tired from work to be the partner you deserve. That's not me preparing excuses, it's me being honest about who I am. Evan, but I can promise you this." He squeezed her hand, making sure she was looking at him, making sure she could see the truth in his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to wake up one morning and decide you're not worth the effort. I'm not going to let fear or inconvenience or any of the 1,000 excuses people use to justify leaving, I'm not going to let any of that be enough to make me give up on this." "How can you possibly know that? We've known each other for 2 days." "I can't know it, not with certainty, but I can choose it." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Every day I can wake up and choose to stay. Choose to show up. Choose to keep trying even when it's hard. That's what commitment is, Lena. Not a feeling that never wavers, but a decision you make over and over again." She was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she was also smiling, that beautiful, broken, hopeful smile that made his heart ache. "You really believe that?" "I really believe that. Even though I'm a mess? Even though I walked into your life with a crazy scheme and enough emotional baggage to fill your entire garage?" "Especially then." He reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "We're all a mess, Lena. The secret is finding someone whose mess fits with yours." She laughed through her tears, that bright, clear sound he was starting to love. "That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm a mechanic. I speak in metaphors about broken things." "I know." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they were breathing the same air. "It's one of my favorite things about you." The kiss, when it came, was soft and tentative, a question rather than a statement. Evan's hand found the curve of her waist, while hers rested against his chest, right over his racing heart. The kiss deepened slowly, naturally, carrying all the emotion they'd been dancing around since she first appeared in his garage doorway. When they finally broke apart, both of them slightly breathless, Lena rested her forehead against his. "So what now?" she whispered. "Now we take it one day at a time, like we said." "One day at a time." She nodded slowly. "I think I can do that." "Good." He kissed her forehead gently. "Because I'm really looking forward to tomorrow." Lena stayed for another hour, talking quietly on the couch, while the night deepened around them. They discussed practical things, their schedules, their commitments, how to navigate the challenges of dating while raising a child. They discussed impractical things too, dreams they'd put aside, hopes they'd been afraid to voice, the kind of future they might want if they let themselves want it. When she finally left, standing on his porch in the cool evening air, she kissed him one more time, longer this time, with more certainty, and then pulled back with a smile that made him feel like he could do anything. "Thank you," she said, "for dinner, for the conversation, for not running away when I dumped all my emotional baggage on your living room floor." "Any time." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "And Lena? For what it's worth, I think your baggage is beautiful." She laughed and shook her head. "You're going to make me fall in love with you if you keep saying things like that." "That's the plan." He watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the darkness, and stood on his porch until the night swallowed every trace of her presence. Then he went inside, locked the door, and leaned against it with a feeling in his chest that he barely recognized. Joy, pure, uncomplicated joy. It had been so long since he'd felt it that he'd almost forgotten what it was like. The lightness, the warmth, the sense that the world was full of possibility rather than just obligation. Upstairs, Mia was sleeping peacefully, her plastic tiara on the nightstand beside her bed. Evan stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, marveling at how quickly life could change direction. 2 days ago, he had been alone, content in his solitude, or at least resigned to it, going through the motions of a life that was perfectly adequate but missing something essential. Now everything was different. Now there was Lena, with her vulnerability and her strength and her willingness to take impossible risks on impossible hopes. Now there was the promise of something more than survival. Now there was tomorrow, stretching out ahead of him like a road he actually wanted to travel. He went to bed that night with a smile on his face and woke up the next morning with the same smile still in place. Mia noticed immediately, of course, children always noticed the important things, and pronounced it suspicious but good. "You look happy, Daddy." "I am happy." "Because of Lena?" "Because of a lot of things. But yes, partly because of Lena." "Good." Mia nodded with satisfaction. "She makes things better." Yes, Evan thought. She really does. The week that followed was a careful dance of discovery. Lena started her new position at Henderson's, and Evan learned to read her moods through text messages. The excited ones when something went well, the frustrated ones when bureaucracy got in the way, the tender ones late at night when she was thinking about him. They saw each other 3 more times that week. Once for coffee on Lena's lunch break, sitting in a corner booth at the diner while she vented about the learning curve of management. Once for dinner at her apartment, where Evan discovered she couldn't cook but made up for it with excellent taste in takeout. And once for a Sunday afternoon at the park, all 3 of them together, watching Mia terrorize the playground equipment while they sat on a bench and talked about everything and nothing. Each meeting peeled back another layer, revealing new facets of who they were and who they might become together. Lena learned that Evan had once wanted to be an architect, but had given it up when his father got sick. Evan learned that Lena had a secret talent for watercolor painting that she hadn't indulged in years. They traded childhood stories and adult fears and the particular vulnerabilities that only emerge when someone has proven themselves worth confiding in. "Tell me about your father," Lena asked one evening, when they were sitting on Evan's porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "He was the best man I ever knew," Evan said simply. "Worked hard, loved deeply, never complained about the hand life dealt him. He built the garage from nothing, turned it into something the whole town depended on. When he died, I felt like I'd lost my anchor." "How did you keep going?" "Mia." The answer was immediate and certain. She was 3 when he passed, still needed bedtime stories and boo-boo kisses and someone to make her believe that the world was safe. "I couldn't fall apart because she needed me to hold together." "And now? Do you still feel like you're just holding together?" Evan considered the question carefully, wanting to give her an honest answer rather than a comfortable one. "I think I'm starting to feel like more than that. Like maybe the foundation is solid enough that I can build something new on top of it, instead of just maintaining what's already there." Lena's hand found his, their fingers interlacing in that particular way that had become their habit. "I want to be part of that building, if you'll let me. I'm counting on it." The 4th week brought their first real test. Evan got a call from Mia's school in the middle of the afternoon. She'd fallen on the playground and needed stitches. By the time he got to the emergency room, his heart was pounding so hard he could barely think straight. Mia was fine, just a cut on her chin that looked worse than it was. But Evan sat in the waiting room afterward, holding his sleeping daughter, and felt all the fears he'd been pushing aside come rushing back. This was what vulnerability meant. This was the price of letting people in, because now there was someone else to worry about. Not just Mia, but Lena too. Someone else who could be hurt, who could leave, who could shatter the fragile happiness he'd been building brick by careful brick. His phone buzzed, a text from Lena. "Just heard. On my way. What do you need?" The response came automatically, the words typed before he'd consciously decided to send them. "Just you." She arrived 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath, still wearing her work clothes. She didn't ask questions or demand updates or do any of the things that would have made the moment about her. She just sat down beside him, wrapped her arms around him and Mia both, and held on. "She's okay," Evan said, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel until now. "I know." Lena's hand stroked his back in slow, soothing circles. "But are you okay?" He hadn't expected the question, hadn't realized how much he needed someone to ask it. "I will be." He pressed his face into her shoulder, letting himself lean on someone else for the first time in years. "I will be." They sat like that for a long time, the 3 of them tangled together in the uncomfortable plastic chairs of the hospital waiting room, and something settled into place with a quiet click. Not dramatic, not earth-shattering, just the simple recognition that this was what partnership looked like, showing up when things got hard, staying when it would be easier to leave, choosing, over and over again, to be present. The nurse came to discharge them eventually, and they walked out of the hospital into the fading evening light. Mia, drowsy from the ordeal but already chattering about how cool her stitches were going to look, held one of Evan's hands and one of Lena's, swinging between them like a bridge. "Can Lena come home with us?" Mia asked. "I want her to see my stitches tomorrow when they don't have the bandage." Evan looked at Lena over Mia's head. "You're welcome to stay, if you want." The invitation hung in the air, weighted with meaning neither of them addressed directly. "I want," Lena said quietly, "more than anything." They drove home together in Evan's truck, Mia falling asleep in the back seat before they were halfway there. Lena's hand rested on Evan's knee as he drove, a point of contact that said everything words couldn't. Later, after Mia was in bed and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, they sat together on the couch in the darkness, not speaking. Sometimes silence was its own kind of conversation. "Today scared me," Evan finally admitted. "Not just Mia getting hurt, but realizing how much I have to lose now, how much more there is to be afraid of." "That's the trade-off, isn't it?" Lena's voice was soft. "The more you love, the more you risk. Is it worth it?" "What do you think?" He turned to look at her in the dim light filtering through the curtains. This woman who had appeared in his life with a desperate question and stayed to become the answer to questions he hadn't known to ask. "I think it's the only thing that is worth it," he said. "Everything else is just survival." "Then we keep going." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Together. Whatever comes." "Together," he agreed. Outside, the moon rose over Cedar Mill, casting silver light on the ordinary streets of an ordinary town where something extraordinary was quietly taking root. In houses up and down the block, people slept and dreamed and carried on with lives that had nothing to do with Evan or Lena or the impossible love story unfolding in their midst. But in one small house, with its peeling paint and its cramped kitchen, and its walls covered in photographs of a little girl growing up, two people sat in the darkness and made silent promises to each other. To stay, to choose, to build, to stop surviving and start living. The road ahead was long and uncertain, full of obstacles neither of them could predict. But for the first time in longer than either could remember, that uncertainty felt less like a threat and more like an adventure. They would face it together. The weeks folded into months with the gentle inevitability of seasons changing, each day adding another thread to the tapestry they were weaving together. Lena's toothbrush appeared in Evan's bathroom holder, then her favorite coffee mug in his kitchen cabinet, then her slippers by the door, small migrations of belonging that neither of them acknowledged directly, but both noticed and cherished. Mia's stitches healed into a thin white scar on her chin that she showed off to anyone who would look, declaring it made her look like a pirate. She started calling Lena by her first name without any prompting, then graduated to holding her hand without asking, and finally, in a moment that stopped Evan's heart, climbed into Lena's lap one evening without any hesitation at all, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "She's never done that with anyone else," Evan murmured later, after Mia had gone to bed and he and Lena were cleaning up the dinner dishes together. "Not even my mother when she was alive. Mia's always been cautious about physical affection with people outside our little unit." Lena's hand stilled in the soapy water. Is that okay? I wasn't sure if I should." "It's more than okay." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "It means she trusts you, really trusts you, and Mia doesn't give that trust easily. Neither does her father." "No." He pressed a kiss to the side of her neck. "But I'm learning." October brought crisp air and changing leaves and Mia's 8th birthday, which she insisted had to be celebrated with both Daddy and Lena present, or it wouldn't count as a real party. They held it in Evan's backyard, stringing fairy lights between the trees and setting up a cake that Lena had somehow managed not to burn, despite her general incompetence in the kitchen. "I supervised," she explained to the assembled guests, a handful of Mia's school friends and their parents, plus Mrs. Patterson and a few of Evan's regular customers who had become something like extended family. "Very intense supervision. I watched that cake like a hawk." "She also set off the smoke alarm twice," Evan added. "That was unrelated to the cake." It was extremely related to the toast she was making at the same time. The laughter that rippled through the small gathering felt warm and real, the kind of easy joy that had been absent from Evan's life for so long he'd forgotten what it sounded like. He watched Lena move through the party, chatting with parents she'd never met, helping children with their plates, occasionally catching his eye across the yard with a smile that seemed to say, "I can't believe this is our life." Neither could he, if he was honest. The improbability of it still struck him sometimes in quiet moments. The chain of events that had led them here, the desperate question in his garage that had somehow become the foundation of everything that mattered. "You look happy," Mrs. Patterson observed, appearing at his elbow with the knowing smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for years. "Really happy. Not just going through the motions happy." "I am." Evan watched Lena help Mia arrange the candles on her cake, their heads bent together in conspiracy. "I didn't know it could feel like this." "Like what?" Like I'm not just surviving anymore. Like there's actually something to look forward to instead of just getting through each day." Mrs. Patterson patted his arm with grandmotherly affection. "That's love, dear, the real kind. The kind that makes you better instead of just making you feel good." "Is there a difference?" "All the difference in the world. But," she nodded toward Lena, who was now trying to light the candles while Mia bounced impatiently beside her. "The good kind of love makes you want to be the person they think you are, even when it's hard, even when it would be easier to stay the same." Evan thought about that as he crossed the yard to join his daughter and the woman who had become so much more than a stranger with a desperate question. He thought about who he'd been before Lena, capable, sure, but closed off, functional, but not flourishing. A man who had taught himself to need nothing and no one, who had built walls so thick that he'd forgotten there was anyone inside worth protecting. Lena had changed that, not by demanding he be different, but by showing him what was possible when he let someone in. "Ready for the candles, birthday girl?" Lena asked, finally getting the last one lit. Mia's face glowed in the candlelight, her eyes wide with the particular magic that only children can summon for birthday wishes. "Ready." "What are you going to wish for?" Evan asked, though he knew she'd never tell. Mia took wishes seriously. They were sacred contracts with the universe that must never be spoken aloud if they were to come true. "I can't tell you, Daddy." She gave him the look she'd inherited directly from him, patient, slightly exasperated, endlessly fond. "But I think it might already be coming true." She blew out the candles in one mighty breath, and the yard erupted in applause and cheering. Evan caught Lena's eye across the smoking cake, and something passed between them. A question, maybe, or an answer. Either way, they both smiled. After the party wound down and the guests departed, and Mia had been tucked into bed, still clutching the stuffed horse that had been Lena's gift, Evan and Lena sat on the back porch watching the fairy lights twinkle in the darkness. "Thank you," Evan said quietly, "for today, for all of it. You don't have to thank me for wanting to be part of your lives. I know, but I want to anyway." He took her hand, running his thumb across her knuckles. "3 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this. Any of it. And now it feels like you've always been here." Lena was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the lights dancing in the autumn breeze. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything." "Sometimes I still wake up expecting this to be over, expecting something to go wrong, or for you to realize you made a mistake, or for the other shoe to drop the way it always has before." She turned to face him, and he could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the old fear that never quite went away, no matter how much evidence accumulated against it. "I'm trying to trust this, to trust us. But it's hard, Evan. It's so hard to believe that good things can just stay good." "I know." He pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I feel it too sometimes. The waiting for disaster feeling. How do you handle it?" "I remind myself that worry doesn't prevent bad things from happening. It just prevents you from enjoying the good things while they last." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And I remind myself that even if something goes wrong, even if this doesn't last forever, it's still worth it. Every moment with you is worth the risk of losing you." Lena made a small sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. You're too good at this, you know that? Saying exactly the right thing. I've had a lot of practice with bedtime reassurances. Mia goes through monster under the bed phases. I don't have monsters under my bed. No. He pulled back to look at her seriously. Your monsters are sneakier than that. They live in your head and tell you lies about what you deserve. The words landed somewhere deep, and Evan watched emotions flicker across her face. Recognition, vulnerability, and something that looked almost like relief at being understood. What if the monsters are right, she whispered. What if I don't deserve this? Then none of us do. His voice was firm, certain in a way he hadn't felt about anything in years. Lena, if love was something we had to earn, no one would ever get it. That's not how it works. Love is a gift you give to people, not because they've proven worthy, but because you choose to give it. And you choose me? Every day. He cupped her face in his hands, making sure she could see the truth in his eyes. Every single day, I wake up and choose you. And I'm going to keep choosing you for as long as you'll let me. The kiss that followed was different from their others, deeper, more certain, carrying the weight of declarations that words couldn't fully capture. When they finally broke apart, Lena was crying, but she was also smiling, and Evan understood that sometimes those two things went together. Stay tonight, he said. Not just for a few hours. Stay. What about Mia? Mia would love to wake up and find you here. She's been asking why you don't live with us yet. Lena laughed through her tears. She's direct, that one. She gets it from me. He smiled. So what do you say? Stay? Yes. The word came out without hesitation this time. Yes, I'll stay. She stayed that night, and the next, and the one after that. By the end of October, her apartment was more storage unit than living space, and by mid-November, Evan suggested what both of them had been thinking. Move in with us. They were in his kitchen, making breakfast together in the easy rhythm they'd developed. Evan handling the eggs, Lena managing the toast she'd finally learned not to burn, Mia setting the table with the particular intensity of a child determined to do her job perfectly. Lena's hand stilled over the toaster. What? Move in. He said it casually, like he was suggesting they try a new restaurant, but his heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Stop paying rent on a place you barely use. Stop dividing your life between two locations. Just be here, with us. Evan, I know it's fast. I know we're supposed to take things slow, but we've been taking things slow for 3 months, and all it's done is prove that we work, that this works. He set down his spatula and turned to face her fully. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want Mia to stop asking when you're going to live with us and just have you here. She asks that? Every other day. She's made lists of where your stuff could go. There's a very detailed diagram involving her colored pencils. Lena laughed, but there were tears in her eyes again. Happy tears he was learning to recognize. A diagram? Complete with labels. She's very organized. I noticed. Lena took a shaky breath. Are you sure? This is a big step, Evan. Living together, combining our lives. What if it changes things? It will change things. That's the point. He crossed the kitchen to take her hands. I don't want to keep dating you, Lena. I want to build a life with you. A real life, with morning routines and bedtime stories and fighting over who forgot to buy milk. All of it. Even the fighting over milk? Especially that. He grinned. I've heard it's very romantic. Mia appeared in the kitchen doorway, apparently having completed her table-setting duties. What's romantic? Nothing, sweetheart. Evan's voice was steady despite the enormity of the moment unfolding. Lena and I were just talking. About what? Evan looked at Lena. Lena looked at Evan. Something passed between them, a question, an answer, a decision made. About whether Lena should move in with us, Evan said carefully. What do you think? Mia's face underwent a transformation that Evan would remember for the rest of his life. First confusion, then understanding, then a joy so pure and uncomplicated that it seemed to light up the entire room. Really? She looked between them, as if checking for signs that this was a trick. Really, really? Really, really. Lena's voice was thick with emotion. If you want me to. Want you to? Mia launched herself across the kitchen and into Lena's arms with a force that nearly knocked them both over. I've wanted you to since forever. Daddy, did you ask her? Did she say yes? I asked her. Evan felt something shift in his chest, a final piece clicking into place. She hasn't said yes yet. Mia pulled back to look at Lena with an expression of such earnest hope that it could have melted stone. Please say yes. Please, please, please. You can have my room if you want. I'll sleep in the closet. I don't mind. You're not sleeping in the closet, Lena laughed, brushing tears from her cheeks. And I don't need your room. So that's a yes? Lena looked up at Evan over Mia's head, and he saw everything in her eyes, the fear and the hope and the courage it took to choose love when experience had taught her to choose safety. Yes, she said. That's a yes. The celebration that followed involved a lot of jumping and screaming and what Mia called a happiness dance that she invented on the spot. Breakfast burned while they were distracted, but no one cared. Some mornings were too important for practical concerns like eggs and toast. The move happened over Thanksgiving weekend, a flurry of boxes and decisions about what to keep and what to donate and where everything should go. Lena's modest possessions merged with Evan's equally modest possessions, and somehow the combination felt like more than the sum of its parts. I can't believe I'm doing this, Lena said on the last day, standing in her empty apartment for the final time. 6 months ago, I was convinced I'd spend the rest of my life alone. And now you're stuck with us, Evan finished, wrapping his arms around her from behind. No take-backs. I don't want take-backs. She leaned into him, fitting against his body like she'd always belonged there. I want what I never thought I could have. And what's that? A family. The word came out small and wondering, as if she couldn't quite believe she was allowed to use it. A real family. Not perfect, not Pinterest-worthy, just real. People who show up for each other, people who stay. We're going to stay, Lena. His voice was rough with the intensity of the promise. Both of us. No matter what. Mia chose that moment to burst into the apartment carrying an empty box she'd apparently decided to repurpose as a helmet. Are we done yet? I want Lena to see her new room. Her new room is also my room, Evan pointed out. I know, but I decorated it. Mia beamed with the pride of someone who had accomplished something important. I put flowers on her nightstand and I made a sign that says, Welcome home, Lena, and I only spelled 2 words wrong. That's very impressive. Lena knelt down to Mia's level. Will you show me? Obviously. Mia grabbed her hand with the casual possessiveness of a child who had claimed someone as their own. Come on, come on, come on! They left the empty apartment together, closing the door on Lena's old life and stepping into the new one that waited. The drive back to Evan's house, their house now, was filled with Mia's chatter about all the things they were going to do together, all the routines they were going to build, all the memories they were going to make. And at Christmas, we can all decorate the tree together, she continued, apparently having given this considerable thought. And Lena can help me make cookies for Santa because Daddy always burns them. I do not always burn them. You burned them last year and the year before. And, okay, I see your point. And Lena can help me pick out presents, and she can read me stories when Daddy's too tired, and she can braid my hair because Daddy tries, but he's not very good at it. Also a fair assessment. And she can be my mom if she wants, but she doesn't have to, because I know that's a big deal, but I just thought I'd mention it in case she wanted to. The car went quiet. Evan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, he could see Mia's expression shift from excited chatter to sudden uncertainty, as if she'd realized she'd crossed an invisible line. I mean, not right away or anything, she added quickly. You'd have to get married first, probably. That's how it usually works in movies. Evan risked a glance at Lena, whose face had gone very still. He couldn't read her expression, couldn't tell if Mia's casual comment had landed as sweet or terrifying or something in between. Mia, sweetheart, it's okay. Lena's voice was quiet but steady. She turned in her seat to look at Mia directly. Can I tell you something? Mia nodded, her eyes wide. I've never been a mom before. I've never had anyone who wanted me to be their mom, so I don't really know how to do it. She paused, gathering her thoughts. but I know that I love your daddy, and I love spending time with you, and I love feeling like I'm part of something instead of just alone. So you'll think about it. I'll think about it very seriously. Lena reached back to squeeze Mia's hand. But even if that doesn't happen right away, or ever, I want you to know you're the closest thing I've ever had to a daughter, and that's not nothing. Mia seemed to consider this with the gravity it deserved. Okay, she finally said. But just so you know, I'm going to keep hoping anyway, because that's what you do when you really want something. You're absolutely right. Lena's voice cracked slightly. That's exactly what you do. The conversation moved on, flowing into lighter topics with the resilience that children had for emotional pivots. But Evan caught Lena's eye in the mirror, and something passed between them. An acknowledgement that Mia had put into words something they'd both been thinking, but neither had been brave enough to say. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibility and uncertainty and the particular terror of wanting something too much. But it also stretched ahead of them together, and that made all the difference. Thanksgiving dinner was chaos in the best possible way. Evan attempted his mother's stuffing recipe and succeeded for the first time in 3 years. Lena mastered mashed potatoes after only one minor incident with the hand mixer. Mia helped by eating approximately half the rolls before they made it to the table. I'm thankful for this house, Mia announced when they went around saying their gratitudes. And for Daddy's job. And for my teacher, Miss Rodriguez, even though she gives too much homework. And for my horses. And for Lena. She paused. Especially for Lena. I'm thankful for you, sweetheart. Lena's eyes were bright. And for your daddy. And for your very detailed welcome home sign. I can make you another one if you want. I would like that very much. Daddy, your turn. Evan looked around at the table, at his daughter, so open and loving and fearless in ways he'd never quite managed. At Lena, finally settling into the life she'd been afraid to believe she deserved. At the small, imperfect home that had become the center of something beautiful. I'm thankful for second chances, he said quietly, for the way life can surprise you when you stop trying to control everything, for the courage to say yes to things that scare you. He reached for Lena's hand, and for every single moment that led us here. The meal continued, conversation flowing between bites, laughter punctuating stories that were becoming shared history rather than individual memories. By the time they'd finished, stuffed and sleepy and utterly content, the evening light was fading to gold through the windows. Movie? Mia suggested, already making her way to the couch. Lena gets to pick because it's her first Thanksgiving with us. That seems fair. Lena followed, letting Mia arrange them on the couch in her preferred configuration. Lena on one end, Evan on the other, Mia squeezed happily between them. They watched something animated and heartwarming, the specific title less important than the feeling of togetherness that wrapped around them like a blanket. Mia fell asleep before the movie ended, her head in Lena's lap, one hand clutching the edge of Evan's shirt as if to make sure he wasn't going anywhere. She's perfect, Lena whispered, stroking Mia's hair with gentle fingers. You know that, right? She's absolutely perfect. She has her moments of being a regular kid, tantrums, stubbornness, refusing to eat vegetables. All of which is also perfect. Lena looked up at him, and in the flickering light of the television, her face held something he hadn't seen before, a certainty that went beyond hope. Evan? Yeah? I've been thinking about what Mia said. In the car. His heart rate picked up. Which part? All of it. She took a breath. I know we haven't talked about the future in those terms. Marriage, family, all of it. And I don't want to rush anything or put pressure on you. Lena, let me finish. She held up her free hand, the one not tangled in Mia's hair. I spent so long being afraid of wanting things, convincing myself that wanting too much would only lead to disappointment. But being here with you and Mia, I can't pretend anymore. I want this. I want all of it. The morning routines and the bedtime stories and the burned cookies and the arguments about milk. We really need to buy more milk. A surprised laugh escaped her. That's your takeaway? No. He leaned across the sleeping child between them, close enough that he could speak without waking her. My takeaway is that I want all of that too. Every single part of it. And I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you, but I'm starting to think there's never going to be a perfect moment. There's just this one, right now. What are you saying? I'm saying... He paused, reaching into the pocket of his jeans where a small velvet box had been sitting for 3 weeks, waiting. He'd bought the ring on impulse one Tuesday afternoon, walking past the jeweler's shop downtown and knowing, with sudden certainty, that he was going to marry this woman. I'm saying that Mia's not the only one who's been hoping. Lena's eyes went wide as he produced the box, as he shifted Mia gently and slid off the couch to kneel on the worn carpet of his living room, as the moment transformed from ordinary to extraordinary in the space of a heartbeat. Evan, Lena Moore. His voice was steady, which surprised him because his hands were shaking. 4 months ago, you walked into my garage with the most insane request I'd ever heard. You asked me to pretend to love you, and I said yes because I thought I was helping a stranger in need. But somewhere between that first day and this one, I stopped pretending. And I started realizing that everything I thought I knew about my life was wrong. Evan, I thought I was fine alone. I thought surviving was enough. I thought love was something that happened to other people, people who were braver or luckier or less broken than me. He opened the box, revealing a simple ring with a single small diamond. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress anyone who measured worth in carats, but something that felt right for who they were. You showed me I was wrong about all of it. You showed me that surviving isn't living, and that brave isn't the absence of fear. It's showing up anyway. You showed me what it looks like to choose someone, really choose them, every single day. Tears were streaming down Lena's face now, but she was smiling, that beautiful, broken, hopeful smile that had stolen his heart in the first place. I don't have a perfect life to offer you, Evan continued. I have a small house that needs repairs, and a business that barely breaks even, and a daughter who will definitely have opinions about everything forever. But I can promise you that I will show up every day for as long as you'll have me. I can promise that I will choose you over and over, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You're doing it again, Lena whispered. Doing what? Saying exactly the right thing. Then let me say one more. He held the ring up, his heart hammering against his ribs. Lena Moore, will you marry me? The silence stretched for what felt like forever, but was probably only seconds. In that silence, Evan saw his entire future hang in the balance, the home they could build, the memories they could make, the family they could become. And then Lena said the word that changed everything. Yes. It came out as a whisper, barely audible, but it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Evan slid the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled so badly it took 3 tries. Lena laughed through her tears, helping him guide it into place, and when it finally settled, a perfect fit, which felt like its own kind of miracle, she pulled him up from the floor and into her arms. The kiss was interrupted by a small voice from the couch. Does this mean Lena's going to be my mom? They broke apart to find Mia watching them with wide, hopeful eyes, apparently not as asleep as they'd thought. If she wants to be, Evan said, looking at Lena. I do. Lena's voice was steady, despite the tears still tracking down her cheeks. More than anything in the world, I do. Mia's celebration was immediate and enthusiastic, involving a lot of jumping on the couch and what she called the biggest family hug ever. The 3 of them stayed tangled together for a long time, laughing and crying and making promises that felt as solid as stone. Later, after Mia had finally fallen back asleep and Evan and Lena lay together in the darkness of their room, the magnitude of what had happened began to settle in. I'm going to be a wife, Lena murmured, her head resting on Evan's chest. And a mother. I never let myself think. Neither did I. His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. Funny how life works out. Funny's one word for it. She tilted her head up to look at him. Do you think we're crazy, moving this fast, making these promises? Probably. He smiled in the darkness. But I don't care. Sometimes crazy is exactly what you need. When did you know? She asked. That you wanted this? Evan thought about it, really thought, tracing back through the memories of the past 4 months. I think part of me knew the first day, he admitted. When you walked into my garage with that ridiculous request, and I said yes even though every logical part of me was screaming to say no, some part of me recognized you, recognized that you were supposed to matter. That's terrifyingly romantic. I'm a romantic guy, didn't you know? I'm learning. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. And for the record, I think I knew too. That first day. That's why I chose you out of everyone in this town. Because something in me recognized something in you. Two broken people finding each other. Two broken people choosing to be whole together. She lifted her head, and even in the darkness, he could see the light in her eyes. That's the story I want to tell. Not the broken parts, but the choosing, the staying, the building something beautiful from the wreckage. That's a good story. It's our story. She smiled. And it's just beginning. Outside their window, the first snow of winter began to fall, dusting Cedar Mill in white and transforming the ordinary town into something magical. Inside, two people who had spent years building walls around their hearts lay together in the darkness, marveling at how quickly those walls had crumbled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, wedding planning and family dynamics and all the practical concerns that came with merging two lives into one. But tonight was for savoring, for gratitude, for the simple, profound joy of having found each other against all odds. Evan fell asleep with Lena in his arms and his daughter down the hall, and a future ahead of him that looked nothing like he'd imagined, and everything like what he'd always needed. The lie that had brought them together had become the truest thing either of them had ever known, and from here, the truth would only grow. The winter months passed in a flurry of wedding preparations and holiday celebrations, each day weaving new threads into the fabric of their shared life. Christmas came with all the magic Mia had dreamed of, a tree decorated by 3 pairs of hands, cookies that Evan only burned slightly, and presents exchanged in pajamas on a snowy morning that felt like something from a storybook. Lena had never experienced a family Christmas before, not like this. Her childhood holidays had been quiet, strained affairs, shadowed by her father's absence and her mother's grief. And after Derek, she'd stopped celebrating entirely, treating December 25th as just another day to get through rather than something to anticipate. But watching Mia tear through wrapping paper with wild abandon, seeing Evan's face light up when he opened the vintage toolbox she'd spent weeks tracking down, feeling the warmth of belonging that she'd craved her entire life, all of it overwhelmed her in ways she hadn't expected. "You're crying again," Mia observed, pausing mid-destruction of her new art supplies packaging. "Happy tears," Lena assured her, swiping at her cheeks. "I'm getting a lot of those lately." "That's because you're practicing for the wedding. People cry at weddings a lot. I saw it in a movie." "Very true." Evan pulled Lena close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Though I was hoping to keep the crying to a minimum on the actual day." "No promises," Lena laughed. "I've been crying at everything lately. Commercials, sunsets, that video Mia showed me of the dog reuniting with its owner." "That video makes everyone cry," Mia said solemnly. "It's science." January brought the serious business of wedding planning, which turned out to be significantly more complicated than either Evan or Lena had anticipated. There were venues to visit and caterers to interview and invitation designs to approve, and 100 other decisions that seemed minor individually but accumulated into something overwhelming. "Why does anyone do this more than once?" Lena groaned one evening, surrounded by brochures and sample books and her laptop open to 17 different tabs. "How do people survive planning multiple weddings?" "Practice, I assume." Evan handed her a glass of wine and settled onto the couch beside her. "Though, if I remember correctly, our first wedding was pretty simple." "Our first—" She looked at him confused. "We've never been married before." "I meant the fake one. The one we rehearsed in my living room before the picnic." He grinned at the memory. "March 15th, brake pads, proposed at sunset by the lake. That wedding was beautifully simple." "That wedding didn't actually happen." "Details." He kissed her cheek. "My point is, we don't have to do any of this if we don't want to. We could go to the courthouse tomorrow, sign some papers, be married by lunch." Lena considered this. Part of her, the part that had spent years protecting herself from disappointment, found the idea appealing. Simple. Safe. No risk of something going wrong. But another part of her, the part that had slowly awakened over the past several months, wanted something different. "No," she said finally. "I want a real wedding, not huge or fancy, but real. I want to stand in front of people who matter to us and make promises that mean something. I want Mia to be part of it. I want—" She trailed off, searching for the right words. "You want to celebrate," Evan finished for her. "After years of just surviving, you want to actually celebrate something." "Yes." Her voice was thick. "Exactly that." "Then that's what we'll do." He pulled her against his side, brochures crinkling beneath them. "We'll figure out the details, together." The wedding date was set for April 15th, exactly 1 year after Lena had walked into Evan's garage with her desperate question. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. "I can't believe it's only been a year," Lena said one morning, studying the calendar on her phone. "It feels like I've known you forever." Sometimes the important things happen fast. Evan was fixing breakfast, moving around the kitchen with the easy competence of long practice. "My dad used to say that life doesn't always give you time to prepare for the things that matter most. Sometimes it just throws them at you and expects you to catch." "Your dad sounds like he was pretty wise." "He was." Evan's voice softened with memory. "He would have loved you, Lena. He always said I needed someone who could match me, someone with backbone and heart in equal measure." "You think I have backbone?" "You walked into a stranger's garage and asked him to be your fake fiancé. That takes a certain amount of backbone. Or a certain amount of desperation. Maybe both." He slid a plate of eggs in front of her. "Either way, my dad would have approved." The wedding preparations continued through February and March, each week bringing new challenges and small victories. Lena found a dress, simple, elegant, ivory rather than pure white, at a consignment shop in the next town over. Evan surprised everyone by having strong opinions about flowers, ultimately selecting a mix of wildflowers that reminded him of the meadow behind his childhood home. Mia appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, complete with a clipboard and a very serious expression that made both adults bite back laughter on a daily basis. "The seating chart needs revision," she announced one evening, spreading papers across the kitchen table with the authority of a seasoned event planner. "Does it?" Evan examined the papers, which appeared to be covered in crayon-drawn stick figures with names written beneath them. "What's wrong with it?" "Mrs. Patterson can't sit near Mr. Henderson because they had a fight about his dog last summer. And Marcus from the grocery store needs to sit near the exit because he gets anxious in crowds. And Carolyn should probably be at a table by herself because she intimidates everyone." Lena exchanged a look with Evan over Mia's head. "How do you know all this?" "I pay attention." Mia shrugged as if this were obvious. "People tell you things if you listen properly." "She's going to rule the world someday," Evan murmured. "Definitely," Lena agreed. As April approached, Lena found herself thinking more and more about the moment that had started everything. That afternoon in the garage with its smell of motor oil and the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. The desperation that had driven her there. The impossible question she'd asked a man she'd been watching from a distance for months. She thought about what might have happened if she'd lost her nerve. If she'd turned around at the door, convinced herself to find another way, resigned herself to watching the promotion slip away. She would have survived. She always survived. But she would have missed this life, this love, this family that had grown around her like something wild and beautiful. "You're doing it again," Evan said one night, finding her standing at the window of their bedroom, staring out at the darkness. "Doing what?" "Thinking too hard." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I can practically hear the gears turning." "Just reflecting." She leaned back into his warmth. "Marveling at how different my life is than I thought it would be." "Good different or bad different?" "The best different." She turned in his arms to face him. "Did you know, that day in the garage? Did you have any idea what was going to happen?" "I had no idea," he admitted. "I thought I was helping a stranger with a strange problem. I thought it would be one day, maybe two, and then we'd go back to our separate lives and never see each other again. But instead, I found my person." He cupped her face in his hands, the one I didn't know I was looking for, the one who made me realize that everything I'd settled for wasn't enough. Not because it was bad, but because there was so much more possible. Evan Brooks, that might be the most romantic thing you've ever said. I've been saving it up. He kissed her softly. 2 weeks until I get to marry you. I'm practicing my vows. Those are your vows? Part of them. He grinned. The rest is a surprise. The morning of April 15th dawned clear and bright, as if the universe had decided to cooperate with their celebration. Lena woke early, alone in the guest room of Mrs. Patterson's house, where she'd spent the night per Mia's insistence that the bride and groom couldn't see each other before the wedding. It's tradition, Mia had explained very seriously. Bad things happen if you break tradition. What kind of bad things? I don't know, bad things. That's why we don't risk it. So Lena had kissed Evan goodbye the night before, already feeling the anticipation building in her chest, and retreated to Mrs. Patterson's house for what was supposed to be restful sleep, but had actually been hours of staring at the ceiling, running through everything that could go wrong. What if the weather turned? What if someone got sick? What if she tripped walking down the aisle, or forgot her vows, or started crying so hard she couldn't speak at all? But as she watched the morning light spread across the ceiling of the guest room, a different feeling began to settle over her. Calm. Certainty. The bone-deep knowledge that whatever happened today, she was making the right choice. She was marrying Evan Brooks. She was becoming Mia's stepmother. She was choosing, deliberately and permanently, to build her life around these two people who had shown her what love could look like when you stopped being afraid of it. Nothing else mattered. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lena? You awake? Mia's voice pitched high with excitement. I'm awake, come in. The door burst open and Mia flew across the room, launching herself onto the bed with the enthusiastic abandon that only 8-year-olds could manage. It's the day. It's finally the day. Are you nervous? Are you excited? I'm both. I'm nervous-sighted. Nervous-sighted? Lena laughed, pulling Mia close. Is that a word? It is now. I made it up because there wasn't a word for how I'm feeling. Mia snuggled against her side. Is this what it feels like to get a mom? All butterflies and happiness and wanting to throw up a little? I think that's exactly what it feels like. Good. Mia was quiet for a moment. Lena, can I ask you something important? Anything, sweetheart. After today, can I call you Mom? The question hit Lena with the force of something she hadn't realized she'd been waiting for. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned, and for a moment she couldn't speak at all. I know you're not my real mom, Mia continued, apparently interpreting the silence as hesitation. My real mom is somewhere else, and she doesn't want to be my mom anymore. But you want to be my mom, right? You said so at Thanksgiving, and I've been waiting to ask properly, but I wanted to wait until it was official, until you were really going to be part of our family forever, and now it's almost official, so I thought maybe, yes. The word came out rougher than Lena intended. Yes, Mia, you can call me Mom. I would love that more than anything. Mia's smile could have lit up the entire room. Really? Really, really. This is the best day ever. Mia threw her arms around Lena's neck. Even better than my birthday, and that was a really good day. They stayed like that for a long moment, tangled together in the morning light, and Lena felt something fundamental shift inside her. Not just love, she'd been feeling that for months, but belonging. The deep, unshakable certainty that she had found her place in the world, and nothing could take it from her. Okay, Mia said eventually, pulling back with business-like determination. We need to get you ready. Your hair person is coming at 9 and your makeup person is coming at 10, and we have to be at the lake by 2, and there's a lot to do. You're very organized. I know. Mia beamed with pride. Daddy says I get it from him, but I think I get it from me. The hours that followed passed in a blur of preparations that somehow felt both endless and too fast. Lena's hair was swept into an elegant updo. Her makeup was applied with subtle precision. Her dress, the simple ivory gown that had made her cry in the consignment shop, was carefully buttoned up the back. And through it all, Mia was there, offering opinions, fetching things, providing a running commentary that kept Lena from disappearing too deeply into her own nervous thoughts. You look like a princess, Mia declared when all the preparations were complete. Like the most beautiful princess in the world. Thank you, sweetheart. Lena examined herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. Not because of the dress or the hair or the makeup, but because of the light in her eyes. The hope. The joy. She looked like someone who believed good things could happen. "Time to go," Mrs. Patterson announced from the doorway. "The car is here." Lake Crescent was transformed. The North Shore, the same spot where Henderson's Grocery had held their picnic almost exactly a year ago, was now decorated with wildflowers and ribbons, and the fairy lights that Mia had insisted were essential. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, already filling with guests. At the end of the makeshift aisle, an arch woven with greenery and more wildflowers marked the spot where everything would become official. Lena watched from the car as guests arrived and found their seats. She saw Marcus from the grocery store, strategically positioned near the exit, as Mia had planned. She saw Carolyn, who had become something like a friend over the past months, sitting with quiet dignity in the front row. She saw customers from the garage, neighbors from down the street, people who had been strangers a year ago and had somehow become community. It's time. The officiant, a cheerful woman named Pastor Linda, who had made Evan and Lena laugh during their planning sessions, appeared at the car window. "Everyone's ready." Lena took a breath, then another. "You can do this," Mia said from beside her, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "And you don't have to do it alone. I'll be right there with you." "I know," Lena squeezed back. "That's what makes it possible." They walked together toward the aisle, Lena in her ivory dress, Mia in the pale purple dress she'd chosen herself, both of them carrying small bouquets of the wildflowers that Evan had selected. Music began to play, something soft and acoustic that Lena vaguely recognized, and the gathered guests rose to their feet. But Lena barely noticed any of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the man standing at the end of the aisle, wearing a suit she'd never seen before and an expression that made her heart stop. Evan was crying, not dramatically, not making a scene, just silent tears tracking down his cheeks as he watched her approach. The sight of it, this strong, steady man who had spent years protecting himself from vulnerability, undid something in Lena's chest. She was crying too, she realized, so much for keeping the tears to a minimum. Mia walked her down the aisle, their progress slow and deliberate, and when they reached the arch, the little girl carefully placed Lena's hand in Evan's before stepping to the side. "Hi," Lena whispered. "Hi." Evan's voice was rough. "You're beautiful. You're crying. So are you." "Fair point." Pastor Linda smiled at both of them, clearly used to this kind of exchange. "Friends and family," she began, "we're gathered here today to celebrate the union of Evan and Lena, two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and discovered that love often arrives when we least expect it." The ceremony unfolded like a dream, each moment both crystal clear and slightly unreal. Pastor Linda spoke about partnership and commitment, about the courage it takes to open your heart after it's been broken, about the particular magic of families that are chosen rather than born. And then it was time for the vows. "Evan," Pastor Linda said, "you may go first." Evan turned to face Lena fully, taking both her hands in his. His eyes were still bright with tears, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Lena, a year ago, you walked into my garage with a question that was absolutely insane. You asked a stranger to pretend to love you, and I said yes, not because it made sense, but because something in me recognized something in you. Even then, before I knew your story or understood your heart, I knew you were worth helping." He paused, visibly gathering himself. "But I didn't know, couldn't have imagined, that helping you would save me too. I'd spent years convincing myself that survival was enough, that I didn't need more than what I had, that wanting something better was just setting myself up for disappointment." His grip on her hands tightened. "You showed me how wrong I was. You showed me that love isn't a risk to be avoided. It's the whole point of being alive. You showed me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, and that choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, is the bravest thing a person can do. I promise to choose you, Lena, every day for the rest of my life. I promise to show up when things are good and stay when things are hard. I promise to be the partner you deserve, the father Mia needs, and the man you believed I could be even before I believed it myself. I love you. Not just the version of you I met a year ago, but every version you've been and every version you'll become. Today, tomorrow, and always. Lena was openly sobbing now, mascara probably running down her cheeks, and she didn't care even a little. "Lena," Pastor Linda said gently, "your turn." Lena took a shaky breath, trying to remember the vows she'd carefully written and revised and practiced in front of the mirror. But the words she'd prepared seemed inadequate now, too small for what she was feeling. So she abandoned them and spoke from her heart instead. "Evan, I spent most of my life believing I wasn't worth staying for, that there was something fundamentally broken in me that made people leave. I built walls so high and so thick that I forgot there was anything on the other side worth seeing. And then I walked into your garage with the most ridiculous request imaginable, and you said yes, not because you owed me anything, not because you were going to get something out of it, but just because you saw someone who needed help, and your instinct was to help. That's who you are, Evan. Someone who helps. Someone who stays. Someone who taught me that love isn't something you have to earn or prove yourself worthy of. It's something you're supposed to just give, freely and completely, trusting that the right person will receive it the way it's meant to be received. You are the right person. You and Mia both. You're my family. The family I didn't know I was looking for, the family I was afraid to hope for, the family that changed everything. I promise to love you without reservation and trust you without fear. I promise to be the partner you need and the mother Mia deserves. I promise that no matter what happens, no matter how hard things get, I will never stop choosing you. You asked me once what I wanted, what I really wanted deep down that I was afraid to admit. And the answer is this: you, this life, this family, forever. The rings were exchanged, simple bands that they'd chosen together, nothing fancy but perfectly them. And then Pastor Linda was smiling, saying the words that Lena had been waiting her whole life to hear. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Evan, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was soft and sweet and tasted like tears, both of theirs. The guests erupted in applause. Mia launched herself at both of them, turning the moment into a family embrace that made everyone in attendance laugh through their own emotional tears. "We did it," Lena whispered, her forehead pressed against Evan's. "We did it," he confirmed. "You're stuck with us now." Best decision I ever made. The reception was everything Lena had hoped for and nothing she'd worried about. The food was delicious, the music was perfect, and the speeches, particularly the one Mia had insisted on giving, brought the entire gathering to tears multiple times. "When Lena first came to our house," Mia said into the microphone, reading from a piece of paper covered in her careful handwriting, "I thought she was just someone who needed Daddy's help. But then I realized she was actually someone who was going to help us. She taught me that families don't have to look a certain way. They just have to love each other and choose each other and show up even when it's hard." She looked up from her paper directly at Lena. "I never had a mom before. I thought maybe I didn't need one. But then you came and I realized I didn't know what I was missing until I found it. You're the best thing that ever happened to us, Lena, and I'm really, really glad you walked into Daddy's garage that day." Lena was crying again. Of course she was. But when Mia ran over to hug her, when Evan wrapped his arms around both of them, when the whole gathering rose in standing ovation for the 8-year-old's heartfelt words, she didn't mind the tears at all. This was what happiness felt like. Real happiness. The kind she'd stopped believing in. The dancing started as the sun began to set, painting the lake in shades of gold and pink and purple. Evan led Lena onto the small dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. And as the music swelled around them, she felt the last of her old fears slip away. "What are you thinking about?" Evan asked, pulling her closer. "About how different my life is than I planned." "Good different?" "The best different." She smiled up at him. "I had all these ideas about what happiness would look like. A fancy apartment, an important job, a relationship that looked perfect from the outside. None of those things happened. And instead I got a small house that needs repairs, a partner who comes home smelling like motor oil, and a stepdaughter who makes lists and gives speeches and believes in magic. Sounds terrible. It sounds like everything." She rose on her toes to kiss him. "It is everything, Evan. You and Mia, you're my everything. They danced until Mia insisted on cutting in, and then the three of them danced together, silly and joyful and completely unconcerned with looking foolish. The guests joined in, and soon the dance floor was full of people celebrating not just a wedding, but the improbable, beautiful story that had led to it. As the evening wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, Carolyn approached Lena with an expression that was softer than usual. "I hope you know," she said quietly, "that I never cared whether you were really engaged. What I cared about was whether you were ready to step into a bigger role. And the answer, clearly, is yes." "Thank you, Carolyn, for everything. Thank yourself." Carolyn glanced at Evan and Mia, who were posing for photos with some of the departing guests. "But I will say this, you picked well. That man looks at you like you hung the moon." "He looks at everyone that way." "No." Carolyn's voice was firm. "He looks at Mia with love, and he looks at his customers with kindness, but the way he looks at you, that's different. That's the look of someone who found something he thought was impossible." She walked away before Lena could respond, leaving those words to settle into Lena's heart alongside all the others that had been spoken today. The last guest departed around 10, leaving Evan, Lena, and Mia alone by the lake as the fairy lights twinkled in the darkness. Mia was half asleep, draped across Evan's lap, still wearing her flower crown and clutching a napkin she'd saved as a wedding souvenir. "We should get her home," Lena said softly. "In a minute." Evan's free hand found hers. "I want to stay here just a little longer. Remember this moment." So they sat together in the darkness, looking out at the lake that had witnessed their first pretend appearance as a couple and now their first real moments as a married family. The water was still and dark, reflecting the lights from the remaining decorations like stars that had fallen to earth. "1 year ago," Evan said quietly, "I was standing in my garage thinking about how to get through another day. Just survive. Just keep going. And then you walked in, and everything changed. For the better? For the everything." He kissed the top of her head. "You gave me back the ability to hope, Lena. You gave me back the belief that life could be more than just getting through it. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't have to thank me." She leaned into him, careful not to disturb the sleeping child between them. "You just have to keep showing up. Keep choosing this. Keep being exactly who you are." "I can do that. I know you can." She smiled in the darkness. "That's why I married you." They drove home slowly, Mia asleep in the back seat, the familiar streets of Cedar Mill passing by outside the windows. Everything looked the same as it had that morning: the houses, the shops, the garage, where everything had started. But everything was different too. Lena was married. She was a mother. She was home. Evan carried Mia up to bed while Lena stood in the living room of their small house, looking at all the evidence of the life they'd built. The photographs on the walls, now including pictures of all three of them. The toys scattered across the floor. The mismatched furniture that somehow worked together perfectly. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't anything like what she'd imagined for herself during all those years of striving and planning and trying to prove she was worth something. It was better. Evan came back downstairs, having successfully transferred Mia to her bed without waking her. "She's out cold. I don't think she'll wake up until noon tomorrow." We wore her out. She wore herself out. That speech alone probably took more energy than the entire reception. Lena laughed softly. "She's going to be trouble when she's a teenager. She's already trouble," but Evan was smiling as he said it. "Our kind of trouble." They stood together in the living room of their home. Husband and wife, partners and parents, and all the other things they'd become over the past year. Outside, Cedar Mill was settling into sleep. Another ordinary night in an ordinary town where an extraordinary love story had quietly unfolded. "So what now?" Lena asked. "What comes after happily ever after?" "Regular life, I think." Evan pulled her close. "Morning routines and bedtime stories and arguments about who forgot to buy milk. The everyday stuff that doesn't look magical but actually is." "That sounds perfect." "It's not going to be perfect. There will be hard days. Days when we drive each other crazy, days when nothing goes right, days when the magic feels very far away." "I know." She rose on her toes to kiss him. but we'll get through those days together. That's the whole point. The whole point, he agreed. Together. They turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to their bedroom, leaving behind the remnants of a day that had changed everything, and stepping into the beginning of everything else. Tomorrow would bring ordinary challenges and ordinary joys, the beautiful mundane rhythm of a life shared fully with the people who mattered most. But tonight was for savoring. Lena fell asleep in her husband's arms, in the home they'd built from scratch, with her daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall. The last thought that drifted through her mind before sleep claimed her was simple and profound. She had asked an impossible question in a stranger's garage, expecting nothing but a favor. And somehow, impossibly, the answer had been love. The truest, most beautiful love of her life. 6 months later, on a golden October afternoon, Lena stood in the doorway of Brooks Auto Repair, which now had a new sign reading Brooks Family Auto, and watched her husband explain to their daughter how to change a tire. "You have to loosen the lug nuts before you jack up the car," Evan was saying patiently. "Otherwise the wheel will just spin." "That makes sense." Mia nodded seriously, her small hands wrapped around the tire iron. "But why are they called lug nuts? That's a weird name." "I have no idea, actually. That's a good question. Maybe we should look it up. Mom, do you know why they're called lug nuts?" Mom. The word still sent a thrill through Lena every time she heard it. Not because it was new anymore, Mia had been calling her that since the wedding, but because it was real, because it meant she belonged. "I don't know either," she admitted, "but I bet we can find out." She walked over to join them, kneeling beside the car that had been Mia's practice vehicle for the past month. It was an old Corolla with more problems than value, but Evan had insisted that every member of the Brooks family should know basic automotive maintenance. "Including me?" Lena had asked when he'd first proposed the idea. "Especially you. You're marrying a mechanic. You should at least be able to check your own oil." She could now. Among other things. The past 6 months had been full of learning, not just car stuff, but all the little details of building a life together. How Evan liked his coffee, black always. How Mia needed exactly 17 minutes of quiet time after school before she could talk about her day. How to navigate the particular rhythms and rituals that made a house into a home. Some of it had been hard. They'd had their first real fight in July, something stupid about household chores that had escalated into something much bigger about communication and expectations. They'd both said things they regretted. They'd both spent a night wondering if they'd made a terrible mistake. But they'd worked through it, talked it out, apologized and forgiven, and learned from the experience. And on the other side, their relationship was stronger than before, tempered by conflict the way metal is tempered by fire. "There," Mia announced triumphantly, having successfully loosened all 5 lug nuts. "I did it." "Great job, sweetheart," Evan ruffled her hair. "Now comes the tricky part." Lena left them to their lesson and walked back into the office, where a stack of paperwork awaited her attention. She'd started helping with the garage's administrative tasks a few months ago, partly because Evan was hopeless at organization, and partly because she wanted to be more involved in the family business. Henderson's Grocery was still her primary job. She'd been promoted to senior manager in the spring, but the garage had become something else, a project they were building together, another thread in the tapestry of their shared life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carolyn. "New inventory system is live, chaos ensuing. Send help." Lena smiled and typed back, "On my way tomorrow. Hold down the fort." The work-life balance she'd found over the past year was something she never could have imagined before. Not perfect, nothing ever was, but sustainable, fulfilling, real. The door opened and Mia burst in, hands covered in grease but grinning from ear to ear. "Mom, I changed a tire. Dad helped, but I did most of it myself." "I'm so proud of you." Lena held out her arms for a hug, grease and all. "You're going to be a better mechanic than your father in no time." "I heard that," Evan called from the garage bay. "You were meant to." He appeared in the doorway a moment later, wiping his hands on a rag and wearing the smile that still made Lena's heart skip even after all these months. "She's a natural. Must get it from her mother." Her mother who couldn't identify a carburetor 6 months ago? Her mother who learned. He crossed the room to kiss her, not caring about the grease on his hands or the paperwork on her desk, or Mia's exaggerated gagging sounds in the background. That's what matters. The learning, the growing, the choosing to be part of something even when it's unfamiliar. Getting philosophical on me? It's been known to happen. Mia tugged at both their arms. Can we go get ice cream? I changed a tire. That deserves ice cream. Everything deserves ice cream according to you, Evan pointed out, because everything does. That's just science. They locked up the garage and walked together toward the ice cream shop on Main Street, Mia between them, swinging their hands the way she always did. The October sun was warm on their faces, and the leaves were just starting to turn, painting Cedar Mill in shades of gold and red. Lena thought about the woman she'd been a year and a half ago. The one who had walked into this town with nothing but a broken heart and a determination to survive. The one who had convinced herself that wanting more was dangerous, that hope was weakness, that love was something that happened to other people. That woman felt like a stranger now. Not because Lena had changed completely. She was still herself, with all her fears and insecurities and rough edges, but because she'd finally stopped fighting against the possibility of happiness. She'd finally let herself believe she deserved it. And here she was, happy, loved, home. What are you thinking about? Evan asked, noticing her silence. About how different everything is than I imagined. Good different? The best different. She smiled up at him. Always the best different. They reached the ice cream shop, and Mia immediately pressed her nose against the display case, beginning her elaborate deliberation process. Evan and Lena stood back, watching her with the particular fondness of parents who knew this decision would take at least 10 minutes. You know, Evan said quietly, a year ago I stood in this exact spot with Mia, and I remember thinking that this was all my life would ever be. Just the two of us, getting ice cream on Saturday afternoons, going through the motions of a life that felt incomplete but functional. And now? Now I can't imagine this spot without you here. He took her hand. I can't imagine any spot without you there. That's very sweet. I've been practicing. I can tell. She leaned into him. I love you, Evan Brooks. I love you too, Lena Brooks. The name still thrilled her. Her new name, the one she'd chosen, the one that marked her as part of this family. Lena Brooks. Wife and mother and partner and friend. All the things she'd been afraid to want, now hers. Mia finally made her selection, mint chocolate chip in a waffle cone, and they settled at a table outside, enjoying the autumn sunshine in each other's company. It was ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of moment that wouldn't stand out in memory as particularly special. But Lena knew better now. She knew that these ordinary moments were the foundation of everything, that love wasn't just the grand gestures and dramatic declarations. It was the ice cream on Saturday afternoons, the tire-changing lessons in the garage, the quiet evenings on the couch after Mia went to bed. It was choosing each other, over and over, in all the small ways that added up to everything. Mom? Mia's voice broke through her thoughts. Will you help me practice my spelling words later? I have a test on Monday. Of course, sweetheart. And Dad, will you finish telling me about why cars need oil? You only got halfway through before we started the tire thing. Absolutely, after dinner. This is the best day, Mia declared, her face smeared with ice cream. All my favorite people and ice cream and learning about cars. What else could anyone want? Lena looked at her daughter, then at her husband, then at the small town that had become home in ways she never expected. And she realized that Mia was right. What else could anyone want? A year and a half ago, Lena had walked into a stranger's garage with a question born of desperation. Would you pretend to be my fiancé? The answer had been yes. And from that single impossible yes had grown everything that mattered, a partnership, a family, a life built on the foundation of choosing each other again and again. The lie that had brought them together had become the truest love she'd ever known. And from here, stretching into the future like a road she finally wanted to travel, was everything else. All of it, together, forever. And that was exactly how the story was supposed to end.